My name's Matt King. I'm 32, a former Army medic, and up until that night, a part-time Uber driver just trying to keep the lights on. After the divorce and too many nights waking up choking on flashbacks, I'd left Oregon behind. My marriage, my career, my so-called stability, all of it gone. Grand Junction was supposed to be quiet. That's what I wanted. Silence. The kind you find on empty highways at 1 a.m. Window cracked, the dry cold cutting across my face, rubber humming against asphalt. No questions, no goodbyes, just miles. That night had been routine. My last passenger was a freshman from the community college. Earbuds in, head down. I dropped him at the dorms, wished him luck on finals, and watched him disappear inside before swinging my car toward the Circle K on East York. My spot. Always the same ritual. Park, pump gas, grab a Monster, nod at the cashier, and back on the road in 5 minutes flat. Predictable. Safe. Only, this time, wasn't. The first thing I saw was the door. Not propped open with a brick like usual. Not stuck on its hinges. Just hanging ajar, the wind nudging it like it couldn't decide whether to shut or welcome me in. At 11:10 p.m., that wasn't right. I stepped inside. The place felt wrong. Overhead lights buzzed and flickered near the drink aisle. The refrigerators hummed, steady and low, but the rest of the store was dead silent. No clerk behind the counter. No tinny pop station drifting from the radio. No half-hearted evening from the kid in the red vest. Just an empty register glowing in the dark like it was waiting for someone. Hello? My voice cracked on the word. Somebody here? Nothing. I moved cautiously down the aisle, the squeak of my sneakers louder than I wanted. The fridge nearest the snack rack was wide open, its alarm beeping in steady protest. A blue Gatorade lay on the floor, bottle rolling slightly in the cold draft. By the mop station, the bucket was overturned, a dirty pool of water spreading across the tiles. And strangest of all, thin drag marks streaked through the puddle. Lines in the slush and dirt that snaked toward the back hallway. Every hair on my neck stood on end. I swallowed hard. Clerk? You okay back there? No reply. Just my breath fogging and the chill seeping through the broken front seal. Every rational part of me screamed to walk out, call it in, and let somebody else deal with it. But my boots carried me forward anyway. The hallway was dim, one overhead bulb pulsing like it couldn't decide to live or die. 2 doors, employee only and restrooms, both shut tight. The employee door's handle was streaked with something dark. Not much, just enough to make my stomach knot. I rapped lightly on the restroom door. Hey, you good in there? My voice dropped to a whisper without meaning to. For a beat, silence. Then, faint movement. A shuffle. I froze. And that's when he appeared. He stepped out of the shadows like he'd been there the whole time. Tall. Hood pulled low, gray sweatshirt damp, jeans darkened at the cuffs like he'd trudged through half-melted snow. He didn't say a word. Didn't even blink. His face wasn't scared, wasn't hostile. It was empty. A hollow expression like whatever was supposed to be behind his eyes had already checked out. You work here? I asked, my body already edging back toward the front. No answer. He passed me slowly, like I was furniture he didn't need to notice. Calm, casual, like a man leaving a dentist appointment, not a scene like this. He pushed through the side emergency exit, cold night air spilling in around him, and disappeared into the snow. I just stood there, heart pounding in my throat, half torn between chasing after him and vomiting on the tiles. My hands shook as I fumbled my phone from my pocket. 911. What's your emergency? The dispatcher's voice steadied me just enough. I forced the words out, every detail I could remember, even as my gut told me I'd just walked through something I wasn't supposed to see. The open door, the empty aisles, the man in the hoodie disappearing into the snow. That's what I told the dispatcher when she asked if I could safely check on anyone inside. My gut twisted and I said, "No, not a chance." She kept her tone even, said help was already on the way, 15 minutes tops. So I waited. I leaned against the coffee machines, eyes locked on that dark hallway like it might spit the man back out at me. The fridge alarm kept beeping in the background, steady, shrill, unrelenting. Funny how that's the thing burned into me now. Not the silence, not even the man's face. Just that endless alarm like a heart monitor, like something warning me the pulse of the place was dying. The police didn't take 15 minutes, they were there in 7. Lights flashing blue and red against the snow outside, the kind of sight that makes your chest clench even if you haven't done a damn thing wrong. 2 officers came in, both tense, one with his hand resting near his holster. "You the caller?" the taller one asked. "Yeah," I said, raising my hand slightly without even thinking. "Matthew King, I just stopped for a drink." They didn't waste time. One swept the aisles, the other went straight toward the back. I didn't move from my spot, didn't want to. A moment later, I heard the shout, sharp, urgent, and then the heavy crack of the restroom door being forced open. I didn't go look. I couldn't. Not until later, when they wheeled a stretcher out. The body bag was unzipped halfway, and I caught a glimpse of brown hair, a pale face, and the bright red of a Circle K polo. His name tag caught the light. Jesse, early 20s, just a kid, really. The paramedic shook his head once as they passed. They told me he was alive when they found him, but he bled out at the hospital an hour later. The rest of the night blurred. Statements, questions, the same words spilling out of me over and over. First to the uniforms, then to detectives, then to a tired woman in a blazer from Circle K corporate who smelled faintly of cigarettes. Did I know the man in the hoodie? No. Had I seen his face clearly? Sort of, but not enough. He looked average. That was the worst part. No scars, no features to cling to. Just a face you'd forget a second after passing it in a crowd. They pulled the security footage the next day. Nothing. Clean slate. The system had been wiped from 10:42 to 11:03, exactly the window that mattered. The last clip showed Jesse smiling, handing a pack of cigarettes across the counter. No hint of trouble, no tension in his face. Then static. The working theory was simple, too simple. Maybe Jesse caught him stealing. Maybe he tried to stop him. Maybe he never even saw the knife before it was too late. Whatever happened, it ended behind that restroom door, blood pooling under the crack while the rest of the store sat frozen in silence. They never caught him. The story floated around for a while, whispered in break rooms, and mentioned in local news blurbs. Then it faded, like these things always do. But not for me. I quit driving nights. I quit stopping at gas stations altogether. If a fridge beeped in a grocery store, I'd flinch hard enough for people to stare. Sometimes I saw Jesse's face in crowds, his red shirt flashing like a ghost at the corner of my vision. Sometimes I dreamed I was back in that hallway. Except this time the man in the hoodie didn't walk past me. This time he turned. They held a small memorial for Jesse at that Circle K corporate, sent flowers. Employees wore black ribbons over their vests. I didn't go. God, I wanted to. But I couldn't. It felt wrong. I didn't know him. I hadn't saved him. I was just the guy who showed up too late. Weeks later, a card arrived in my mailbox. No return address. Just my name in faint pencil across the front. Inside, a short note. You did the right thing. He would have hurt more people if you hadn't called. Jesse was my friend, thank you. No signature. I stared at that card for a long time. Maybe it was his family, maybe a coworker, maybe just some stranger who wanted to ease my conscience. I don't know. It didn't help me sleep. Not right away. But something shifted. Slowly, I started driving again. Only in daylight. I found a therapist. I started volunteering at the vet center with other guys who carried their own ghosts. They say healing isn't straight. It's loops, detours, dead ends. They're right. I'm not fixed. But I'm still here. And sometimes being in the wrong place at the wrong time means you're the only one left to do the right thing. It doesn't make you a hero. It doesn't erase the pain. But it means the story doesn't disappear into static. Someone lives to tell it. And sometimes, that's enough. They say you never notice the rhythm of your life until something snaps it in half. For me, that snap came on a Thursday night in April, 5 minutes before midnight. But you have to know the rhythm first to understand how jarring it felt when it broke. My nights were predictable. The hum of the soda fridge filling the silence, the faint buzz of tired fluorescent lights overhead, the tacky feel of the lottery machine keys sticking under my fingertips. I'd been working closing shifts at the Circle K on Mallard Creek for nearly a year. Not glamorous, not miserable, just enough to keep my gas tank full, groceries in the fridge, and tuition partly paid at UNC Charlotte. I was a junior in digital media, nothing flashy, nothing crazy. Work, school, repeat. I didn't mind nights. In fact, I preferred them. No managers hovering behind me, no never-ending lines. No impatient yelling about scratch-offs or cartons of Marlboros. Most shifts I mopped, stocked, and listened to podcasts with one earbud in. Mostly movies, sometimes true crime. Ironic, given how that night unfolded. That Thursday was quiet. I served 3 people in the last hour before close. A nurse buying Red Bulls looking like she hadn't slept in days. A guy in a tracksuit who kept his hood up, eyes down, like he wanted to disappear. Routine stuff. By 11:45, I was locking the beer cooler, counting the till, rolling quarters, and running the Z report. The store was silent except for the occasional thud of the ice machine and the soft ding of the bathroom door when someone slipped in. Then he walked in. At first glance, he looked ordinary. Mid-40s, maybe my dad's age. Jeans, a gray hoodie, sneakers worn thin at the heels. He shuffled down the aisle, grabbed a Mountain Dew, circled back for pork rinds. Nothing unusual. But the way he lingered, the way his eyes flicked up too often, it didn't feel like browsing. It felt like stalling. He placed his items on the counter, stared at me a beat too long before speaking. "What time you off?" I forced my voice steady as I rang him up. "Midnight." He smiled, but it was the kind of smile that never reached the eyes. His teeth were yellow, uneven, like broken piano keys jammed into his gums. "I'll wait outside," he said. "We can talk." I let out a quick, awkward laugh, trying to make it sound like a joke. "Yeah, not really much of a talker, man." He just nodded, slow, deliberate, as though he'd expected that response all along. He dug into his pocket, counted out exact change, slid it across the counter and walked out. Except he didn't leave. On the monitor above the register, I watched him lean against the brick wall just beyond the reach of the front camera. He crossed his arms, didn't light a cigarette, didn't scroll his phone, didn't pace. Just stood there, watching. My eyes darted to the clock, 11:58. In 2 minutes, the alarm would auto-arm and lock the doors. But that only worked if I was already outside, which meant if I hesitated, I was stuck in here with him waiting on the other side. My chest tightened, my pulse thumped in my throat. This wasn't in the training manual. I started busying myself with meaningless tasks, wiping counters that were already clean, checking the cooler doors twice, straightening coffee cups. Anything to buy time. My fingers fumbled at my phone. I shot a text to Marcus, my roommate. "Dude, weird guy outside. Might need a ride." Read. No reply. I peeked through the blinds near the red box. He hadn't moved. Same spot. Same stare. I couldn't see if he was smiling anymore, but I could feel it. At 12:06, I gave up and called Tanya, my manager. She answered quick. "What's up, Jay?" "Hey, there's this guy outside. Came in right before close, kinda weird. Said he's waiting for me. He's just standing out there." "Is he threatening you?" Not directly. Just doesn't feel right." I don't want to walk out there. There was a pause. Then her voice sharpened. Stay inside, I'm calling CMPD. Keep the doors locked. Don't talk to him. Don't do anything. Just wait. Okay. My voice cracked. You okay, Jay? I think so, I swallowed. Just don't want to be a news headline, you know? She didn't laugh. Tanya always put on a tough exterior, ex-military, night shifts since her own college days. But I heard the concern break through her tone. Hang tight, I've got you. I hung up, checked the monitor again. He was still there, still motionless, still watching. It's hard to explain what fear feels like when it's silent. No scream, no crash, no sudden jump scare. Just that suffocating pressure, like being underwater too long, lungs burning but not knowing when you'll come up for air. At 12:17, red and blue lights washed across the parking lot. 2 squad cars glided in, calm, steady, like this was nothing new to them. One officer went straight toward the man. The other approached the glass doors, raised a hand and gestured for me to unlock them. I fumbled with the keys, my hands trembling so hard I almost dropped them, then turned the lock and let him in. My whole body shook. You're Jaden? Yeah. My voice cracked more than I wanted. You okay? The officer asked. I nodded, though my throat felt too tight to speak. I didn't leave because, I don't know, he was just off. Kept staring, said he'd wait for me. The officer pressed a button on his shoulder radio and murmured something I couldn't catch. Static crackled back, then silence. I turned toward the window again. My stomach dropped. The man was gone. I blinked hard, like maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me. Wait, where'd he go? The officer outside swept his flashlight in a slow, deliberate circle, across the bushes, the edge of the parking lot, down toward the road. The beam caught nothing but pavement and shadows. He was just here, I said, my voice rising. I swear, he was leaning right there. The officer inside glanced toward the glass, then back at me. His expression stayed calm, but there was a weight in his tone when he said, They told me he matches the description of someone we've been watching for. Harassed a clerk on the east side last week. Same setup, waited outside after closing. Never laid a hand on anyone but scared the hell out of them. My mouth went dry. Do you think he was going to do something? The officer shrugged, a tired kind of gesture, like he'd carried this answer too many times. Can't say for sure, maybe he just likes the fear. Either way, you did the right thing. That night I didn't sleep. Marcus asked if I wanted to grab food when I got home, but I just shook my head and lay in bed, staring at the ceiling fan as if its blades held answers. I kept hearing the man's words in my head. I'll wait outside. We can talk. The way he said it, neither friendly nor threatening, just certain. Like it wasn't a question at all. Like it was inevitable. The next morning I asked Tanya for a shift change. She approved it instantly, no questions asked. By the following week I was working mornings. I told myself it wasn't because I was scared, just easier for my schedule. That was the lie I clung to. The truth was, I couldn't risk seeing him again. But fear has a way of bleeding into daylight. Walking to class, sitting in Starbucks, crossing a crowded quad, I'd catch a glimpse of a man with the same slow walk, the same build, always just out of focus, always gone when I blinked. Once, in a Harris Teeter parking lot, some guy asked if I had jumper cables. I jumped so hard I dropped my keys. He looked startled, even apologized. I laughed it off, embarrassed, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. People think fear is loud. Sirens, breaking glass, screams in the night. Sometimes it's a whisper, a shape in your peripheral vision, a sound that doesn't belong. A man leaning against a wall, smiling with his teeth but not his eyes. I didn't tell my mom. She worries enough. I just said I was changing shifts because of classes. She believed me. Honestly, I wanted to believe me too. Months later, I ran into Tanya at a coffee shop near campus. She was off duty, dressed in jeans and a hoodie instead of the Circle K polo. She smirked when she saw me. "You look less like a vampire." "Morning shifts will do that," I said. We joked a little, then her expression shifted. "You ever hear anything else about that guy?" I shook my head. "No, but I think about it more than I should." Her eyes softened. "Yeah, me too. I've been in retail 10 years, closed thousands of nights. You just never know which night it's going to be." That stuck with me. Later that evening, I was walking home alone from the bus stop. The sky was dimming, shadows stretching long across the street. For a second, the air shifted, the same crawling feeling I'd had that night, like eyes pressing into my back. I froze, turned. No one was there. I let out a laugh, but it rang hollow in the empty street. The truth is, some part of me still expects to see him again. Not because I believe in ghosts or fate, but because men like him don't just vanish. They linger, in parking lots, in the edges of dreams, always just out of frame. It's been over a year now. I graduated, moved to Raleigh, started a job in UX design. I haven't seen him again, but that night follows me still. It's in the way I double-check every lock, the way my eyes scan crowds automatically, the way I never ignore that small gnawing voice in my gut. That's the thing no one tells you. Fear doesn't just disappear, it evolves. I'm not 19 anymore counting bills behind bulletproof glass at Circle K, but I carry that night with me. And if you ask me what I learned, I'd tell you this. Survival isn't always about strength. Sometimes it's about listening to your instincts, to your unease, to the quiet voice whispering, "Something's wrong." I don't know what that man wanted. I don't know what he was waiting for, but I know I didn't give it to him. And maybe in some small way that's enough. Always trust your gut. Fear isn't weakness, it's survival. The moment something feels wrong, act, stay put, call someone, walk away. Because danger rarely announces itself. Sometimes it looks ordinary, sometimes it smiles, sometimes it leans against a wall and says, "I'll wait outside." They say your first job shapes you, teaches you responsibility, a little independence, maybe even pride. Mine didn't. Mine taught me how close evil can live beside the ordinary, how it can disguise itself behind a name tag and a tired smile. I was 19, barely a week out of high school, when I started the overnight shift at the Circle K on Long Ridge Road in Huntsville. The hours weren't kind, but I didn't complain. I needed money for college that fall, and the quiet nights gave me space to think. It was usually just me and one other clerk until sunrise. His name was Jim. Jim was in his 50s, rail thin, gray creeping around his temples, his eyelids always heavy as if sleep never really left him. He kept to himself mostly, surviving on cold coffee poured from a scratched plastic thermos. Some nights the silence between us stretched hours long, no more than a muttered, "Hey," when I clocked in, maybe a later when I left. But on the night of July 5th, he broke the silence in a way that stuck with me. "Tile's acting up again," he said as I punched in my code. His voice was low, almost distracted. "Might hear banging, don't worry about it. Plumbing's been bad all week." I froze, my finger still on the clock-in button. "Banging?" I repeated. "Yeah." He sipped his coffee slowly, his eyes on me. "Old pipes. They sound worse than they are. Don't open it. Just ignore it." I gave a short laugh, the kind that's supposed to sound casual but doesn't. "Right. Got it." But something about him unsettled me. Not what he said, but how he said it. Too flat, too rehearsed, like he'd practiced the line in his head. Still, I was the new kid and he wasn't. He'd worked here for years. I figured he'd seen every kind of weird night. Leaks, rodents, raccoons rummaging through the dumpster. So I brushed it off, shelved the chip aisle, stocked the cooler, and fell into the rhythm of a quiet shift. That's when I heard it. Thump, thump, thump. It came from the back hallway, the one with the single-stall restroom. At first I told myself it was a vent, maybe a mop closet door swinging on loose hinges. Then it came again. Thump, thump. This time slower, hollow, rhythmic, like someone knocking from the wrong side of a wall. My chest tightened. I glanced at Jim. Nothing. He didn't even look up, didn't twitch, didn't frown. Just sat there behind the counter, eyes low, sipping, as if the noise didn't exist. Hey, I forced my voice to sound casual, but it cracked anyway. You hear that? Jim didn't turn. He didn't blink. Just swallowed another mouthful of lukewarm coffee. I told you, he said. His voice was firm now, not casual, final. Old plumbing, ignore it. A weight settled in my chest. Something about the way he said, ignore it, made my skin crawl. I nodded anyway, pretended to accept it. But deep down I knew. He was lying. I tried to keep moving, to make myself busy. Wiping counters that weren't dirty, rearranging candy bars already straight. But the noise didn't stop. Thump, thump. Always spaced out, always just long enough to make me question if I imagined it. By midnight, I gave up pretending. My hands were trembling when I pulled out my phone and texted my best friend Maddie. This job's creeping me out tonight. Her reply came instantly. Girl, quit. Retail isn't worth demons in the bathroom. I smirked, but it felt hollow. I wanted to laugh, wanted to dismiss it like she did, but my body knew better. Something was wrong. Jim still hadn't moved. Not once. He hadn't spoken again. He hadn't even poured himself another cup of coffee. He just sat there, flipping through a beat-up spiral notebook filled with receipts and pen scratches, like a man pretending to be busy. The thermos sat empty beside him, untouched. His silence was heavier than the sound from the hallway. At 12:58, he suddenly stood. The chair legs scraped against the tile, sharp enough to make me flinch. I'm taking my break, he muttered. His eyes didn't meet mine. Back in 20. And then he walked out. No jacket, no keys. Just left. Out into the night, like he had somewhere important to be, leaving me alone with the sound still coming from the back. I waited 5 minutes. Then 10. The store was dead quiet except for the humming of the coolers, and every second stretched too long. Finally, I couldn't stand it anymore. I walked toward the back, each step echoing down that narrow hallway. The light above the restroom flickered, buzzing faintly, and it made my stomach twist like something was warning me to turn back. I stopped in front of the door, my hand hovering over the handle. My fingers shook so badly I couldn't bring myself to touch it. Instead, I crouched, pressed my ear to the wood. At first, there was nothing, just the hum of my own pulse in my head. Then I heard it, breathing, low, shaky, human, not pipes, not plumbing, breathing. And then, God. I heard a muffled sob, choked, desperate, the kind of sound that doesn't leave your chest once you hear it. I stumbled backward so fast I nearly tripped, my throat tight and raw. My hands shook as I grabbed my phone, fumbling with the screen like my fingers didn't know how to work anymore. When the operator picked up, my voice came out cracked but certain. There's someone in the restroom, I said. Please, I think someone's trapped. Please hurry. The cops were there in under 10 minutes. Red and blue lights painted the parking lot like a warning flare. One officer stayed with me outside while the other headed down the hallway, his hand resting on his holster. He didn't even bother to knock first. He tried the handle, locked. This is the Huntsville Police Department. His voice was sharp, commanding. Is anyone in there? For a heartbeat, silence. Then a sound, weak. A sob. Then words cracked and breaking apart. Please, a girl's voice said. Help me. The officer didn't hesitate. One hard kick, and the door splintered inward. The next few minutes blur together in my memory. Lights, radios blaring, more cars rolling up, paramedics rushing in with blankets. I stood frozen near the counter, a ghost in my own body, staring down that hallway as if the door itself had swallowed me whole. And then I saw her. They carried her out barefoot, duct tape still clinging to her wrists, streaks of blood across her arms where she'd clawed at the restraints. She couldn't have been more than 15. Blonde hair matted, pale skin, eyes swollen and red from hours of crying. She looked too fragile for the world she'd just been dragged out of. One of the officers came over to me, voice low but steady, asking me to walk him through everything. And I did. I told them about Jim, about the thumps, about his warning, about the way he just left like it was part of the plan. Do you know where he went? The officer asked. All I could say was no. His car was gone. His locker cleaned out. The break room dark. He'd vanished like he'd never been there at all. They kept me at the station until sunrise. Not because they thought I had anything to do with it, but because I was the only one who could connect the dots. I remember sitting there, drained, staring at my own hands as I asked them, what would have happened if I didn't listen to that sound? No one answered me. Later, I learned her name was Emily. She'd been missing for almost 2 days, snatched from a parking lot 2 towns over. The only reason she was still alive, they told me, was because I made that call. Jim never came back. They found his car days later in Pulaski, parked outside an abandoned hardware store. Inside, a burner phone, zip ties, receipts for fast food, a motel key. But no Jim. Interviews with his old co-workers, his neighbors, even people who barely knew him all turned up the same refrain. Quiet guy, a little odd, but nothing dangerous. Turns out no one really knew who he was at all. I quit 2 weeks later. I couldn't set foot inside that Circle K again. Not with the memory of that door, that sound, that notebook of his sitting in my head like a stone. Nights became the hardest. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard it. Thump. Thump. It's been 3 years now. I live in Birmingham. I started college later than I planned, but I made it. I don't work gas stations anymore. Hell, I barely stop at them unless I absolutely have to. Sometimes I still wake up hearing that sound. Sometimes I check the back doors of every building I walk into, making sure no one's hiding in the dark. Trauma is strange. It sharpens you, makes you alert, makes you see danger in the places where others don't. But it also leaves you afraid of silence because you know silence can hold things you never want to hear. People ask me what it felt like, finding her, being the one to call. I always say this. It felt like being in the exact right place at the exact right time, but also like it could have gone the other way. What if I hadn't put my ear to the door? What if I'd trusted Jim? What if she'd been left another night in there? I think about that often. And I think about how ordinary people can stumble into extraordinary moments without even realizing it. If I've learned anything, it's this. Trust your instincts, especially when something feels wrong. Don't let the fear of being mistaken keep you from acting. Because sometimes the only thing standing between a victim and their rescue is one small, trembling moment of courage. I've never been the type to spook easily. I was the girl cracking jokes during horror movies while everyone else clutched throw pillows, shrieking when something jumped out of the shadows. I grew up in Mercer Falls, the kind of small town where people still left their front doors unlocked and trusted their neighbors to look out for them. Safety there was less about locks and alarms and more about belief. But safety is just that, a belief, not a guarantee. I learned that on a night I can still replay in perfect detail. It was March 12th, a Saturday. My friends and I had spent the evening at Kelsey's, the 6 of us huddled together in her basement surrounded by blankets, half-empty soda cans, and the smell of pizza rolls that had been left a little too long in the oven. We were watching those old grainy horror movies from the 90s, the ones where the final girl always tripped while running through the woods and somehow managed to outrun a killer who never even broke a jog. We screamed when the fake blood sprayed across the screen, then collapsed into laughter seconds later. By the time I finally left, it was nearly 1:30 a.m., my eyes gritty from exhaustion and sugar. I took the back roads home. The highway near the industrial zone was still tied up with night construction, and I didn't want to deal with the flashing detour lights and crawling traffic. The back way was darker, yes, but quicker. Out there, the trees pressed in close on both sides, thick branches blotting out the sky, leaving only my headlights cutting two narrow tunnels through the black. Deer eyes flashed here and there from the roadside, eerie as coins in the dark. That's when the low fuel light blinked on. "Seriously?" I muttered, tapping the gauge as if that would change anything. I pulled out my phone. No bars. Perfect. I racked my memory. I'd passed a Circle K about 15 minutes back, glowing like a beacon on the edge of Bramble Creek Road. I sighed. I hadn't planned on stopping. I was still in pajama pants under my hoodie and coat, makeup smudged from the long night, hair sticking to my neck. I just wanted to collapse into bed, but gas tanks don't care about intentions. So I turned around, heading back toward the station. The Circle K sat there alone, buzzing under harsh fluorescent lights. The lot was empty except for a battered old pickup parked off to the side. Near the dumpsters, a man leaned against the wall, a cigarette glowing faintly in the brim-shadowed hollow of his face. His stillness bothered me, like he wasn't waiting, just existing there. I pulled up to pump 4. The overhead light flickered, buzzing like a wasp trapped in glass. Sliding my card into the reader, I waited. Nothing. Tried again. Still nothing. I cursed under my breath and glanced toward the store. The inside was lit, shelves glowing under bright aisles, but the counter looked deserted. My stomach tightened. I glanced back toward the dumpsters. The man was still there, smoke curling, head turned just slightly, but not enough to call it watching. I grabbed my keys and made for the door. Inside, the air was sharp with cleaning chemicals, citrus overlaid on the staleness of nachos that had sat under heat lamps too long. The hum of a flickering ceiling light echoed in the emptiness, making the space feel like a church stripped of warmth. The cashier sat behind the counter, lanky, early 20s maybe, with sunken eyes locked on a cracked phone screen. He didn't look up, didn't say a word, just slouched there, thumb twitching across the glass. I gave a polite nod, the kind you give out of habit, and headed toward the coolers. I grabbed a bottle of water, telling myself I'd pay cash, maybe grab some candy while I was at it, sugar as armor. But when I turned back toward the aisles, I froze. The man from outside had stepped through the sliding doors, a trail of cigarette smoke following him like a shadow. His boots left faint crunches on the salt scattered across the tile. He scanned the room quickly, like he wasn't there to buy anything, just to confirm something, and then his eyes found mine. They didn't move after that. I told myself I was imagining it. Gas stations at this hour always drew the odd stragglers, truckers, drifters, people with nowhere else to be. But when I turned down the candy aisle, he turned too. He didn't look at the shelves, didn't reach for a single thing, just walked behind me with his hands buried deep in the pockets of a stained green parka, his eyes studying me with a kind of focus that felt rehearsed. "Out kinda late for a girl," he muttered, voice low, deliberate, as if he already knew what answer he wanted. I forced myself not to flinch. My lips curled into a quick, polite smile, just enough to smooth the edges to keep whatever this was from sharpening. "Yeah," I said lightly, my voice thinner than I wanted it to be. "Just getting gas, then heading home." I picked up my pace, walking straight to the register like I hadn't even heard him. The cashier finally tore his eyes from his phone when I dropped the water bottle on the counter, the plastic thunk echoing in the too-empty store. My hands shook as I dug out a few crumpled bills, but I didn't bother with change or a receipt. I kept glancing toward the doors, watching the man's reflection in the glass as he trailed behind, slower this time, like he wasn't in a hurry to get anywhere. Outside, the cold bit at my skin. I slid my card into the pump again. This time it chirped and approved, no issue. Figures. My shoulders loosened, just for a second, until I heard the footsteps behind me. "My truck died," he said, gravel dragging in his voice. "Need a ride down to Birchwood?" I turned halfway, the pump nozzle clenched in my hand, trying to keep the steel and rubber barrier between us. He was closer than I thought, just outside arm's reach, close enough that I could smell the stale smoke clinging to his jacket. "I'm sorry," I said carefully, keeping my tone polite, practiced. "I'm actually late meeting someone. They're waiting on me." He stared at me, too long, the kind of stare that peeled at the edges of your words to test their truth. His lips twitched into something that wasn't quite a smile. "You sure?" he asked. He shifted one step closer. "It's just 15 minutes. My grip tightened on the nozzle. "I really can't." He didn't move back. His hand stayed buried deep in his jacket pocket, and for a heartbeat I couldn't tell if he was gripping a phone or something colder. The night air thickened, pressing down on me. My pulse jolted. I yanked the nozzle free, shoved it back into the holder, and slipped into the driver's seat, slamming the door shut. Locks down. I twisted the key. Click. Nothing. My stomach sank. Tried again. Silence. The world went narrow and ringing, the sound of my breath too loud in the sealed car. He stepped closer, the shadow of his parka filling my side window. His voice was steady, almost bored. "You're making a mistake, girl." Then his open palm smacked the glass, hard. Once. The sound was a crack, a promise. Not a plea, not a joke. My body froze, muscles wired with terror. And then, years later, the memory of that sound tangled with the discoveries they made after. Scratches, dozens carved into concrete walls, fingernails wedged into cement like desperate signatures, names scribbled on the back of a dusty photograph. Kay, Mira, Tessa, none of them Maisie. The police ran prints. The name Greg Hartwell was fake. His rental was paid in cash. No valid license. No DMV trail. Just a shell of a person constructed with precision. In the spring thaw 2 months later, dogs led officers to the woods behind his duplex. 2 shallow graves beneath a pine. Small. Children. No identification. No families ever reported them missing. Only makeshift crosses of tree branches and tiny wooden animals carved by hand, lined at their feet like offerings. We didn't stay in Fairbanks after that. Maisie went silent for 3 weeks, her words locked away somewhere unreachable. I didn't sleep longer than a few minutes at a time. I packed us up and moved to the Pacific Northwest. New names, no traceable ties. I deleted every account, severed every old thread of connection. We live quiet now, and no one gets near my daughter without a background check and a waiting period. But shadows don't vanish with distance. Sometimes I catch his shape in a doorway when I walk home late. Sometimes I hear the same soft knock at the back door and freeze, too afraid to breathe. Maisie still has the rabbit. I tried to throw it away twice. Both times it returned to her bookshelf like it had never left. She doesn't talk much about that night except once. I asked if she remembered what he said on the stairs. She looked at me, her voice small, emptied out. He said I reminded him of his real daughter, the one who didn't come around. That's when I knew. He wasn't just a man. He was something else. A collector. Of silence. Of secrets. Of the forgotten things no one notices are gone until it's far too late. We are taught to be polite, to smile, to nod, to avoid offense. But kindness without boundaries is a weapon turned against you. Monsters shovel your driveway. They hold open doors. They mutter in quiet voices at gas stations. Survival means listening to the wrong feeling before it blooms into the right regret. Always trust your instincts, because sometimes the most dangerous door isn't the one you open. It's the one someone else has already locked from the inside. It was February 9th, 2023, 11:22 p.m. at the Circle K on East Ironwood Street in Flagstaff. I'd picked up the night shift to scrape together enough money for art school. Temporary, I kept telling myself. Just a stepping stone, not forever. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead like angry insects. The mop bucket sat in its corner with stale water rocking inside. And in the rare moments between customers, I filled scraps of paper with quick sketches, concertinas of characters, fight scenes, messy thumbnails of the worlds I wanted to build. I thought the night would be routine, boring even. I had no idea how wrong I was. The lights always made my head ache, but I told myself I could live with it. I leaned against the counter, nursing a cup of lukewarm coffee, its bitter taste clinging to my tongue, while flipping through a stack of rough drawings. Battle sequences, sharp expressions, shadow-drenched panels that made my chest race with the possibility of something bigger than this place. The store was still, hushed. Every aisle looked like a hallway leading nowhere. The clock on the wall ticked steady and loud in the quiet. 11:05. 4 customers so far, a pizza delivery guy who barely made eye contact, a jittery student hauling 2 cans of Monster, a road-weary traveler gathering chips and beef jerky. Each encounter short, transactional. A nod, a total. Change in hand, gone. No conversation. At 11:21, everything shifted. It started with a sudden, vicious throb that felt like a hammer driving straight into the center of my skull. My knees buckled and the coffee sloshed, splattering brown arcs across the counter. I grabbed at my head, gasping, blinking, but the room seemed to sway sideways. The black and white tiles beneath me warped into something fluid, melting into each other. My pen clattered from the counter and rolled away, a sound that seemed impossibly loud. I reached back blindly, searching for something, anything to ground me, my hand finding the mop bucket. I thought plunging my face into the cold water might help, might snap me out of it. But my body betrayed me. My legs crumpled, folding underneath like collapsing shutters. I staggered, desperate, and lurched toward the stockroom, needing to get out of sight before someone walked in and found me like this. I shoved past the swinging door and collapsed hard onto a stack of crates. The impact jarred my shoulder with a hollow crunch that reverberated through my bones. I curled up instinctively, knees to chest, trying to ride out the wave. If I stayed small enough, maybe the pain would loosen its grip. Maybe the world would stitch itself back into something steady. But minutes stretched into something shapeless. My breath came ragged, shallow. Sweat coated me in a clammy sheen, dripping down my temples and stinging my eyes. Sometimes I felt hot, like my skin was burning, and then cold, like I'd been dropped into ice. My thoughts slid in and out of reach. Dehydration, stress, migraine. I tried to think of reasons, explanations that didn't end with "something's really wrong." But each time I pushed up on my elbows, my arms shook and failed. I collapsed again, pressing my forehead to my knees, shivering despite the stale warmth of the stockroom. My phone buzzed in my pocket. The vibration felt foreign, like it belonged to another world. I fumbled it out with trembling hands. A text from my brother. "Still at work?" His words blurred, seemed impossibly far away. I wanted to answer, but I couldn't even get my fingers to obey. That's when I heard it. A voice, faint, mechanical. Not human. Ground movement detected in stockroom, the automated alert intoned through the intercom. The sound bounced off the concrete walls, an eerie, flat echo. My heart kicked into a faster rhythm. I barely had time to register the words before I heard the hiss of the front door sliding open. Heavy footsteps rushed inside, faster, louder, closer, and then my manager burst through, eyes wide, like the store had just swallowed me whole. Her voice was sharp, high-pitched with panic, slicing through the haze as she rushed in and found me crumpled behind the stacks of boxes. I couldn't lift my head, but I felt her hands on me, frantic, pressing, shaking gently as if she could jolt me awake. Hey, are you okay? Stay with me." Oh God. The words were muffled, stretched thin, but the urgency pressed through. I caught the sound of her voice breaking as she shouted for someone, then the clipped, trembling rush as she called 911. I wanted to answer, to tell her I was fine, that it would pass, but my lips wouldn't move. The edges of my vision caved inward, black spots blooming and scattering until there was nothing left. When I opened my eyes again, The world was sterile, white, and humming. A ceiling I didn't recognize hovered above me. The sheets beneath me were stiff, the air filled with that unmistakable bite of antiseptic. My head throbbed violently, as if someone had split my skull with a jackhammer. A nurse appeared at my side, steady, practiced. She pressed a cup of water into my shaking hand. "You're lucky, sweetie," she said softly. My throat was so dry my voice barely escaped when I whispered back. The tears came before I knew they were there, stinging, unwanted. A clear IV line ran into my arm, cold fluid dripping slowly, keeping me tethered to something like life. Then the doctor entered, footsteps firm, face serious. Navy scrubs, tablet in hand, expression carefully composed. He didn't waste words. We had a scare. At first we suspected a stroke, then a bleed. He paused just long enough to let the weight of it settle, and I braced myself for something worse. "But your scans show a brain aneurysm pressing against the optic nerve. Small, but unstable, just enough to rupture." His voice was steady, but my stomach hollowed. "You were a hair's breadth from a catastrophic hemorrhage." I stared at the ceiling tiles, forcing words past the lump in my throat. Am I going to be okay?" "Yes," he said, and nodded once, calm but certain. "But it's serious. We'll need more tests. Surgery may be necessary." "I thought I was just dehydrated," I whispered. My voice cracked. He reached out, placed a warm hand over mine, grounding me. "You thought right. But life was sending you warnings. This time you couldn't ignore them." Recovery blurred into long days, 2 spent in the ICU where the beeping monitors never stopped, followed by a quieter private room that felt less like survival and more like waiting. The hospital lights stabbed at my eyes, even coffee, once my crutch, smelled oddly sweet and foreign. My vision shimmered when I tried to read, and my legs shook when I stood to walk the hallway. Still, I kept my sketchbook with me. The pencil scratched slowly across paper, each line deliberate, shaky, sketches of IV poles, outlines of masked nurses, blurred self-portraits with hollow eyes. Illustrating my own unraveling felt strange, like turning my body into a story I hadn't agreed to write. Visitors filtered in, my brother first, pale and tight-lipped, trying not to cry. Then classmates, co-workers, even my manager who had been the one to find me on the stockroom floor. Word spread quietly. Melanie nearly had a stroke. Their voices cracked when they told me how pale, how lifeless I had looked that night. I had to skip classes, lost shifts, filled days with scans and follow-up appointments. Still, I drew. I needed to capture it, to pin down the fragility before it slipped away. 2 weeks later, doctors scheduled the coiling procedure. The thought of it, the precision, the finality, felt surreal, like my life had veered into an irreversible plot twist I hadn't chosen. The fear didn't paralyze me, though. It pushed me forward. I had come too close to what if, and I refused to let my story end there, unfinished. The morning after surgery, nausea tore through me. Exhaustion weighed every limb. But when I woke fully, I noticed something new. The world seemed sharper, clearer. On my bedside table sat my sketchbook, open to an unfinished drawing of a phoenix rising in flame. Its wings stretched wide, bold, unbroken. Now I'm out of the hospital, back to life, though not the same one. I quit Circle K the day after discharge, closing that chapter with no hesitation. I've started selling art commissions online, small steps but growing. My brother helped set up a scholarship fund so I can finally return to art school. I balance part-time graphic design work, careful about my hours, cautious with my health. Water bottles are always within reach. Migraines still hum at the edges of my days, but I listen now. I pay attention. On my desk, next to my sketchbook, sits a crushed paper cup, the same one that slipped from my hand that night, stained with coffee, flattened and fragile. It's my reminder. That job gave me money, but nearly cost me everything else. That pain wasn't just stress. It was my body screaming in a language I refused to hear, until it dragged me down. Listen when your body speaks. It doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers through headaches, tremors, or bone-deep fatigue. Pay attention, because sometimes your second chance depends on it. People always warned me about going back home. After 5 years of drifting between night shifts in small towns, I knew exactly what I was walking into when I returned to Lexington. I took a job as the manager at the Circle K on Meadowview Drive in November 2023, convincing myself it would be easy money, quiet, predictable, free of the kind of chaos I was done living with. I was exhausted, not just physically, but in the kind of way that seeps into your bones. I didn't want drama anymore. I didn't want reminders of the ghosts I'd carried from place to place, real or imagined. All I wanted was stillness. The first week was exactly that. Nights rolled by slow and steady. A few truckers passing through, 1 or 2 bleary-eyed regulars grabbing coffee and those shrink-wrapped breakfast sandwiches. I'd lean on the counter, sip from my thermos, and watch the cameras hum along. Nothing to complain about. Then Benji showed up. He was 22, bright-eyed, said he was starting classes at UK in January and wanted something to keep him busy at night. I remember how he smiled, how polite he was. One of those kids who still said yes, sir, even when you told him not to. He stocked shelves without being asked, swept floors that didn't need sweeping. I thought I'd hit the jackpot. A reliable night clerk? That's gold. For a few weeks, everything ran smooth. Then the inventory started to get off. Not missing exactly, but odd. Numbers matched sales. Categories broke down just fine, but something about the rhythm of it made me uneasy. I'd go over logs twice, 3 times, convinced I was just tired. Cameras showed nothing, no shoplifters, no mistakes. But the reports told me something wasn't right. Then one night, 2:17 a.m. sharp, I watched it happen. A woman came in wearing a puffy jacket. She had a candy bar in her hand. She dropped it, clattering onto the cold tile. Benji bent, picked it up, scanned it, handed it back. She didn't thank him. She just left. Simple, forgettable. The next night at 2:17 a.m., she came back. Same jacket, same brand of candy bar, dropped it again. Benji, same motion, same scan, same wordless exchange. By the third night, I wasn't just noticing, I was waiting. I sat in the office staring at the timestamp overlays, watching the presale logs tick upward, watching the door sensor feed, waiting for 2:17 to hit. And like clockwork, she walked in, dropped the candy bar, and walked out. It didn't stop. Night after night, for a week straight, the same routine. I staggered shifts, stayed up on nights I wasn't supposed to work just to see if it would break. It never did. This wasn't a glitch. This was a pattern. Like someone had pressed play on a loop I wasn't supposed to see. At first, Benji didn't notice. I tried to bring it up without sounding insane. "Funny how she keeps showing up," I said one morning, as casual as I could. "You clocked that, right?" He blinked at me, expression empty, like I'd just spoken another language. He didn't laugh, didn't acknowledge it, just went back to organizing cigarette cartons. I let it drop. I didn't want him thinking I was losing my mind. But after that, the shifts started to feel different. The air at night grew colder, like the cooler doors were propped open somewhere. The hum of the porch light outside seemed sharper, the scanner's beep louder, the ding of the entry bell almost rehearsed. And the customers, God, the customers. A man in a green hoodie would come in, buy a can of soda. A teenager would walk straight to the fridge, grab a Red Bull, never look at me, never say a word. The same people, the same motions, every night. It was mechanical, like a program repeating itself. Only every so often I'd notice something wrong. A snag when a lottery ticket jammed in the machine. A plastic bag falling to the floor at the exact same moment as the night before. It was déjà vu with a vice grip, tightening each shift until I felt like I was suffocating. 2 weeks later, I came in for the morning shift. The store was unlocked, lights on, but Benji was gone. His jacket was still hanging in the break room. His phone sat on the table, plugged into the charger, screen still lit from an unread message, and no trace of him anywhere. That wasn't like him. Benji wasn't the type to just disappear mid-shift. The sight of his phone left charging on the break room table made my stomach twist. I called him immediately. Straight to voicemail. Tried again. Same result. My hands shook as I scrolled through the emergency contact list in the system. His mom picked up on the third ring, groggy, confused. Benji? No, honey, he left for work like normal, she said. Her voice sharpened when I told her he wasn't at the store. What do you mean he's not there? Did something happen? I had no answers. Just the icy certainty something was wrong. I called a couple coworkers. Nothing. No one had seen or heard from him. That's when I dialed 911. I told them a clerk vanished mid-shift, that he was missing, that something wasn't right. The dispatcher gave me the standard script. Wait 24 hours, maybe he walked off. But I couldn't shake the feeling. This wasn't a kid skipping out. This was something else. I went back into the office and pulled up everything I could. Logs, time-stamped footage, inventory records. I scrolled until my eyes blurred. That's when I found it. A receipt buried in the system. 5 years old. Same store address, same register number. December 3rd, 2018, 3:13 a.m. A gas sale, a pack of gum, a note with the address, Meadowview Drive. The date hit me like ice water. December 3rd. The exact same calendar day, 5 years earlier. I dug further. The clerk working that night had been a teenage boy. His name barely appeared in the records. No notes about why he stopped showing up. But a news clipping surfaced in the back of my mind. His mom and sister had died in a house fire that same night, just 6 blocks away. The boy disappeared after that. Never charged, never officially tied to anything. Just gone. Another tragedy, folded into the fog of small-town rumor. And now here I was, in the same building, on the same night. 5 years later, the threads knotted together in my chest until I could barely breathe. It wasn't coincidence. This store, this address, was a loop, a knot in time, spiraling in on itself, swallowing kids like Benji, like that boy, maybe like me. I told my district manager. She laughed. This isn't the Twilight Zone, it's retail. Midnight shifts screw with your head. Take a week off, I'll get a temp in. She thought I was burnt out. Maybe I was, but that didn't change what I'd seen. 2 nights later, I came back anyway. Shift started 11 p.m., ended 7 a.m. I arrived early, 10:45, heart pounding like I was walking into an execution. Everything was normal. Inventory balanced, cameras running, time cards synced. I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it all. Then 3 a.m. came. The lights flickered, humming like a throat clearing before something spoke. I froze. At 3:13 a.m., it broke open. The scanner beeped by itself. The cash drawer popped. The door chimed. And the woman in the puffy jacket glided in. Same candy bar in her hand. Same stumble. Same cold silence. Behind the counter stood Benji, smiling that same cheerful nod like nothing had happened. My chest tightened. I lunged for the emergency light switch, flipping it hard. Nothing changed. The air stayed heavy, charged. Benji glanced at me just for a second, eyes flickering with something. Recognition? A plea? Then he turned back, scanned gum, nodding to no one. The pumps beeped. Beep, beep, steady, mechanical. I stumbled forward, yanked the cord from the register. The POS screen died. The drawer slammed shut. The woman froze. She didn't buy the candy. She stared at me instead. Her eyes glistened wet, wide, pleading or condemning. I couldn't tell. The fluorescent light caught the silver zipper of her coat gleaming like a blade. She whispered, low and broken. Again. My pulse hammered in my ears. The overhead fluorescence flickered until the whole store shuddered. The AC cut out with a cough. And then, she was gone. Benji too. Silence dropped. Heavy and absolute. The kind of silence that isn't empty but full, pressing against your ribs until you can't breathe. I didn't clock out. I couldn't. I just walked the aisles one last time, my footsteps echoing too loud against the cold tile. The register drawer sat open, waiting. At 3:59, I pushed through the glass doors and into the night. I left everything behind, keys, jacket, phone still buzzing in my pocket. I got in my car, turned the engine, and drove into the dark without headlights, as if hiding from the world itself. I didn't stop until sunrise lit the highway. I never went back. I changed towns, swore off night shifts for good. Even now, years later, I can't hear a register beep without my chest locking tight. Some nights I dream it. Same gum, same woman, same store. I wake drenched in sweat, staring at the ceiling fan like it might flicker into that humming light. I don't pretend to understand what happened, whether it was a time loop, an echo, or just my mind snapping under fluorescent midnight hours. But I know this. When reality starts repeating itself, when patterns emerge too precise to ignore, pay attention, because not every loop lets you out. My name's Nathan Blair. I work as a travel photographer. Landscapes, quiet towns, forgotten little places tucked between cornfields and highways. I'm not someone who hunts for danger, not the type to pick fights with strangers in parking lots. I make a living pointing my lens at things that most people drive past without seeing. Grain silos leaning with age, crumbling theaters whose marquees still whisper the names of films no one remembers, and weather-beaten faces that look like they've been carved into the very soil of the Midwest. It was February 3rd, a Thursday, edging past midnight. I was somewhere between Minneapolis and Madison, my dad fresh out of heart surgery. The guilt of not being there sooner pressed down on me like another passenger, silent and heavy. The only company I had was Milo, my scrappy gray rescue cat who hated winter as much as I did, but endured it better, curled in the carrier on the seat beside me. We'd already slid twice on Highway 12, the car jerking sideways while the snow fell in ragged sheets like shredded paper caught in invisible currents. Road signs were plastered white, unreadable. My fingers ached from gripping the wheel. That's when I spotted the Circle K glowing ahead, its harsh fluorescent lights cutting through the storm like a lonely beacon. Relief pulled me toward it. I turned into the lot, heater rattling against the cold, Milo letting out a long, uneasy meow, like even he sensed the wrongness bleeding through the air. I told myself it was just the weather, just exhaustion. All I needed was caffeine, a bathroom, maybe a few minutes to stop shaking. But some nights don't care what you need. They've already decided what they'll teach you. The glass doors slid open with a mechanical chime, the sound swallowed instantly by the low drone of lights buzzing overhead. No music played, no hello from behind the counter. Just the hollow echo of my boots scraping salt-streaked tiles. Behind me, Milo yowled softly in protest, his cry fading as the door shut. At first I assumed the cashier had stepped into the back. The counter sat unattended. A styrofoam cup of coffee half drained but still warm. The soda fountain gave a broken hum, a sluggish line of red slush dripping steadily from its nozzle onto the grate below. That's when I noticed them. 2 men standing near the beer cooler. They weren't browsing. One leaned against the fogged glass door, hood pulled low, his face angled toward me for just a second before he looked sharply away. The other tilted in close, whispering too fast for me to make out more than a murmur. My pulse snagged when I caught 2 words as I passed. He's alone. I froze for half a heartbeat, trying not to show it. The second man's hand slipped into his coat, not toward a wallet, not for a drink, but for something hidden. His eyes caught mine briefly, a cold, flat calculation, then broke away. My chest thumped. Keep moving, I told myself. I walked quickly toward the back hallway where the restrooms were. forcing my steps to stay even, casual, as if I hadn't heard what I'd heard. Behind me, their voices carried again, sharper now, riding over the hum of the soda machine. "Just wait by the side near the ice machine." I didn't breathe. Not really. My body moved without my permission, slipping into the restroom and easing the door shut. I didn't lock it. Locking it would have felt like a trap. Instead, I turned the faucet on, the splash of water covering the trembling of my hands, then stared into the mirror at my own pale reflection. My heart was running ahead of me, searching for answers. Above the sink, a small window waited. Metal framed, old, no wider than 2 feet across. Just enough. My dad's voice rose in my head, the one lesson he'd drilled into me since I was a kid. If something doesn't feel right, it isn't. Trust your gut. Your gut is smarter than the smartest man you'll ever meet. I climbed onto the toilet, palms slick against the paint-chipped frame. The glass resisted at first, then groaned open on stiff hinges. A blast of bitter air slapped me hard in the face, the taste of snow rushing my lungs. Outside, the storm still howled, flakes whipping sideways in the wind, erasing the world into shifting gray. I hesitated only long enough to know there wasn't another choice. I hauled myself through the narrow frame, scraping my shoulder as I squeezed out, then dropped into the snow-packed alley behind the store. My boots sank deep, nearly to the ankles, and I stumbled forward, catching myself with raw palms against the icy pavement. The metal had bitten into my skin, but I didn't stop to feel it. I tucked my chin, lungs burning with frozen air, and pushed into a run along the back wall toward the lot. The cold didn't just sting, it punched through my jacket like 1,000 needles, filling my chest with fire every time I dragged in a breath. My exhales streamed out in frantic bursts of fog, little clouds tearing away behind me. When I reached the corner, I skidded to a halt. One of them was there. He stood behind the propane cage, no more than 5 steps from my car. The storm muffled everything, but I could hear my pulse hammering in my ears. He hadn't seen me yet. I dropped low, crouching hard into the snow, body trembling, heart so loud I half expected him to hear it through the wind. The man shifted, his shoulders tilting as he stepped out from the cage, eyes scanning the lot. For a second, he turned away. That was all I had. I bolted. Snow crunched under me as I sprinted across the open ground, boots sliding. My hand slammed against the door handle, yanking it open. I threw myself inside, Milo exploding from his carrier straight into my lap with a wild, panicked wail. I hit the locks with my elbow, breath ragged, chest tight, then movement. The second man burst from the shadows on my left, his figure cutting through the white chaos of the storm, sprinting full tilt toward the driver's side. His arm was raised, something dark gripped tight in his hand. I didn't think. I slammed the car into reverse. The tires spun wildly, throwing snow into a storm of its own before the car lurched back, fishtailing hard. My headlights cut across his face for just a fraction of a second. His expression wasn't one of bluff or intimidation, and whatever he held, it wasn't there to scare me. I shoved the gear shift forward, the engine roaring as the car bucked onto the road. I didn't look back, I just drove. By the time I made it to the next town, I was shaking so badly I could barely dial. I pulled into a crowded diner parking lot, parked under the glow of sodium lights, and called the sheriff's office. Inside the warm hum of voices and clatter of dishes, I gave my report over a cup of untouched coffee, one hand never leaving Milo's back. His body was warm, grounding me in a way my own body couldn't manage. The deputy who arrived was calm, professional, his notepad filling with quick strokes as he asked for details. Finally, he closed it with a soft snap and said, "You weren't the first, and I doubt you'll be the last." A week later, they called to confirm what I'd already guessed. The 2 men had been caught on camera in at least 2 other late-night robberies. Always the same pattern: quiet towns, snowstorms, forgotten back roads. But that night in Baraboo, they left with nothing. Too rushed, too sloppy. They hadn't expected anyone to notice the silence. I've never taken that route again. I avoid back roads in the snow now, even if it means running my gas tank down to fumes. My work slowed for a while. Whole weeks where I couldn't bring myself to raise my camera. A month passed before I took another photograph, but their voices still echo. I can still feel the way the air changed, that subtle shift when safety drains out of a place and danger steps in before you can see its face. Milo still meows every time I stop for gas, and every time I listen. People like to talk about bravery as if it's always dramatic, standing tall, charging forward, running into the fire. But the truth is quieter. Sometimes real bravery is the whisper in your gut that says, "Leave now." That night, I didn't prove anything. I didn't fight anyone. I didn't save a stranger's life or stop a crime. What I did was listen, and I made it home. That counts. Your instincts are louder than fear for a reason. You don't need evidence when your body already knows. Silence itself speaks, and if you're lucky, you'll hear it. Because sometimes silence is the only warning you'll ever get. I never thought a part-time job at Circle K could drag me to the edge of something I couldn't explain, but it did. My name's Shelley Hart, and when I was 28, I took the overnight clerk job at the station on Vesper Hill Road in Roanoke, Virginia. My dad had just started chemotherapy, and I needed every cent I could scrape together to help with his co-pays. Nights seemed practical, no distractions, no stares, double pay, and silence I could fold myself into. Chris, my manager, was blunt the first night. "Shelley," he said, leaning against the counter with that half grin he had. "Things get weird around 3 a.m., you'll see. Just shake it off." I nodded, already imagining drunk teens or a raccoon rattling trash cans. Nothing I couldn't handle. That first week was mostly what I expected. Stocking shelves, ringing up Red Bulls, mopping bathrooms. The new camera system kept everything visible, every corner covered. Most nights I'd see a couple of late-night drivers, a local grabbing a soda, sometimes the same paramedic stopping by for coffee and small talk. The kind of shift where the hours just dissolve and you go home with mop water still on your shoes. But then 3 weeks in, it started. I was crouched in front of the soup cans, lining them neatly on the third shelf, when a full row toppled over. Not just a slip. Every can rolled onto the floor in a perfect arc, like a hand had brushed them. I froze, then turned toward the monitor behind me. Nothing. No customer, no glitch in the feed, just an empty store. I muttered to myself, "Damn shelves crooked," and forced my hands to stop shaking while I restacked them. A week later, it was worse. At 2:46 a.m., the door chime rang sharp and clear. My stomach dropped. I hurried to the counter, eyes fixed on the glass doors. But no one came in. No door swinging shut, no shadow slipping through. Just the dark parking lot glowing under a buzzing streetlight. I stood there, heart hammering, the radio droning out a looping weather report that felt almost taunting in the silence. My brain kept shoving logic at me. Faulty sensors, rodents, maybe wind pressure. But the rest of me didn't buy it. My body knew the difference. The air at that hour felt wrong, colder than it should, like someone had just walked past. Every shift ended quietly after that, but leaving felt like stepping out of a trap. I didn't tell Dad. He had enough to carry. I just smiled when he asked how work was and kept showing up. Then came the night that proved Chris's warning wasn't about drunks or rats. It was April 8th, 2022, my 7th week. I clocked in at 11. Aiming to coast through like always. Chips restocked, candy topped off, floors swept. Routine. Around 2:30 a.m., I checked my phone. Dad was asleep, meds taken. I shot my roommate a quick text. "Almost done." She pinged back. "Hang in there." I laughed under my breath, though it sounded forced, hollow in the quiet. At exactly 3 wangs, the lights flickered. Just a hiccup, but sharp enough to freeze me mid-step. A blast of cold air swept through, colder than any AC could make it. It crawled up my spine, needling between my shoulders. Then came the sound. 3 slow knocks. Not at the front door. Not anywhere a customer would be. The sound came from the storeroom. That door was steel, heavy, always locked. It shouldn't have been possible. I stopped in the middle of the aisle, staring at the faint glow of the flickering pantry light above it. My pulse thudded in my throat, and every instinct begged me not to move. But I made myself walk anyway, each step too loud, echoing through the aisles like someone was following. I reached the door. My hand shook as I touched the handle. It turned easily, unlocked. The hinges groaned when I pushed it open. I flicked the switch. Harsh fluorescent light filled the tiny room, just the same dusty shelves, mop buckets, boxes of coffee packs. No footprints, no rats, nothing broken. But then I saw it. On the floor, near the corner, a Polaroid. Edges curled, colors almost bled away. I picked it up with both hands, afraid my fingers might smear it. The picture showed a boy in a Circle K uniform, smiling awkwardly, clutching a balloon. I flipped it over. On the back, in looping cursive, April 9th, 1994, his shift never ended. The words made my chest seize. A story I didn't know but suddenly understood spread in my head like wildfire. Some kid, alone at night, never making it home. The cans, the phantom chime, the knocks. The store didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like it was breathing, like it was waiting. I tucked the photo into my jacket pocket and stepped out of the storeroom. The door swung shut behind me with a heavy metallic click that seemed to echo through my ribs. I tried to shake it off, tried to return to routine, but my pulse was still thrumming like I'd run a mile. I stayed until dawn, acting like nothing had happened, but the Polaroid burned hot against my chest like a secret I couldn't carry. Chris rolled into the lot just after 6, radio blaring, steaming cup of coffee in hand. He pushed through the doors with his usual lazy stride. "How was the night?" he asked, tone casual. I forced a smile that felt stiff on my face. Quiet. That was all I could give him. I went back to mopping the floor, ringing up the first wave of early commuters and stocking shelves like everything was normal. But I kept feeling it. The weight of eyes that weren't there, watching from every corner of the store. When Chris wandered toward the storeroom, I slipped the photo into the back office drawer and shut it gently. I couldn't bring myself to ask about it. If I opened my mouth, I was sure I'd sound unhinged. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, hearing every squeak of the cooler door replay in my head, every hum of the fluorescent lights, every echo of silence from that storeroom. At 1 a.m, I sat up on my couch, grabbed my laptop and typed, Circle K 1994, Roanoke boy. The results made my blood run cold. A grainy local news clip popped up. 22-year-old Ethan Schultz went missing April 9th, 1994. Last seen alive leaving a Circle K on Vesper Hill Road. No trace ever found. The date matched, the store matched. And the boy's face, Ethan's face, was the one smiling up at me in that Polaroid. My breath came ragged. "Oh God," I whispered into the empty room. His shift really never ended. I slammed the laptop shut and shoved it under the couch cushion. But the truth sat heavy on my chest. That Polaroid hadn't been an accident. The next night I showed up anyway, running on caffeine and nerves. My uniform was neat, my shoes polished, but my stomach was knotted. Every beep of the register, every squeak of the cooler door, felt sharper than usual. I kept the radio turned up to some obnoxious talk station just to drown out the quiet. But when the hosts paused, the silence seemed to breathe around me. At 2:59, the lights dimmed. A cold draft slithered past my ankles. At 3 sharp, the storeroom door gave 3 slow, patient knocks. This time I didn't walk toward it empty-handed. I pulled out my phone, switched on the flashlight, and opened the camera app so I'd have proof. I inched toward the back, chest tight, breath shallow. I opened the door. Nothing. Just shelves and supplies. No Polaroid. I stood there, trembling, when footsteps suddenly echoed behind me. Heavy, deliberate. My stomach dropped. I spun around, phone shaking in my hand. The aisles were empty. The registers were empty. The parking lot outside lay drenched in rain, silent under the harsh glow of the streetlight. I turned back toward the storeroom, and that's when I saw it. A small handprint pressing into the metal door from the inside. A child's palm. The impression smeared faintly across the steel like someone had dragged it downward. I rushed over, my hand reaching without thinking. The print was there, real, ice cold, so cold it burned my skin when I touched it. I yanked my fingers back, heart crashing in my chest, and then, without sound, a word settled into my mind like it had been whispered directly into my skull. Stay. That was my last night at Circle K. By noon, I handed my keys to Chris. He looked at me for a long second, eyes duller than usual. He didn't ask for details. He just nodded and said quietly, "It doesn't bother you if you don't acknowledge it." But you did. My throat tightened. I feel it. That was all I managed. He didn't push further. I left, moved closer to Dad's hospital, picked up a job at a quiet bookstore, daytime shifts only. I drive to his treatments now without glancing over my shoulder, without feeling phantom drafts slipping through the car. For a while, I believed I'd left it all behind, but every night at 2:57 a.m., my dog, Max, stiffens at the hallway closet. His ears prick, his teeth bare, and then he growls, 3 low, guttural growls. Every time I freeze. I open the door, just to prove to myself it's empty. And it always is. Just shadows, stale air, and silence pressing down. But as I lie awake afterward, I can't stop thinking about Ethan. About that Polaroid. About the boy who never left his shift. I don't know where he is. I don't know what he wants. All I know is some jobs don't end when you clock out. Some places hold you, keep you. And sometimes, the silence speaks louder than the daylight. Respect it. Listen to what unsettles you. And when the knocking comes, don't ignore it. Because some stories never clock out. Graveyard shifts have a rhythm, a strange, almost secret music that only the people awake while the world sleeps ever really tune into. The quiet isn't peaceful so much as heavy, pressing in from every corner of the store. The hum of the refrigerators became a kind of background bass line. The chime above the front door when it rang broke the silence like a bell in a church. Sometimes a drunk stumbled in at 3 a.m., swearing that a hot dog cost too much and trying to barter like it was a pawn shop. I didn't mind it. Truth be told, I liked it. Nights like that gave me room to breathe, to think, and when it was slow, to crack open my textbooks at the counter. I was 26, halfway through nursing school. Every shift at the Circle K on Silver Creek Road keeping me just far enough from drowning in debt. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept me afloat. That night was a Thursday, early October. Rain ticked against the front windows, steady and cold, coating the street outside with puddles that swallowed up the last yellow leaves of autumn. It was around 4:05 a.m., the dead hour, when even the last stubborn partiers finally gave up on the night. I was wiping down the coffee station when I heard the door chime. She stepped inside. Tall, drenched to the bone, her long black coat looked like it belonged to another century. Water dripped off the hem and pooled on the tile. Her heels clicked, sharp and deliberate, echoing against the empty aisles like something from an old noir film. Her makeup had run in streaks down her cheeks, and strands of wet hair stuck across her skin like spiderwebs. She didn't say a word. Just walked over to the coffee machine, filled a cup, grabbed a pack of instant ramen from the shelf, and set it all on the counter. Exact change clinked against the surface, her gaze fixed somewhere far past me. "Rain's brutal out there," I said, trying to sound casual. My voice felt too loud in the silence. "You okay, ma'am?" That was when she looked at me. Her eyes weren't red from crying. They weren't even wet. They were hollow, bottomless, like something had been scraped out from inside her. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft, distant, like she wasn't really speaking to me at all. "My husband died last night," she said. "Head-on collision. I came here before the ambulance even arrived." I froze. The words lodged in my throat like stones. I fumbled for something, condolences, sympathy, anything, but whatever I said didn't land. She didn't even blink. Then she tilted her head slightly as if listening to something I couldn't hear. "Do you believe in punishment?" she asked. Her tone had shifted, less fragile now, more deliberate. I don't know," I said slowly. "I'm not really religious." She studied me for a long, heavy beat, then gave the faintest nod. "You should believe in it," she said quietly, "because it believes in you." She didn't move. She just stood there, coffee steaming between us. The store felt colder suddenly, as if the heater had shut off. My stomach tightened, my palms damp. I'd dealt with emotional customers before, lonely people who poured out too much, people who wept at the counter. But this felt different. There was an edge to her presence, something that unsettled me deep in my chest. Then, all at once, her expression hardened. Her voice sharpened, turned brittle. "You're one of them," she said flatly. I blinked, confused. I'm sorry." She lifted a finger and pointed at the gum rack, the glowing hot case of taquitos behind me, the lottery machine by the wall. "All of this," she spat. "Junk, poison, and you smile while selling it." "Ma'am, I started, but my words stumbled over themselves. "You don't care, none of you care. Just like the paramedics, just like the priest. You look people in the face while they suffer and you smile." Her eyes bored into me. I felt myself edging back, my heel bumping against the bottom of the counter. My hand hovered near the emergency button, but I hesitated. "I didn't mean any harm," I said carefully, my voice thinner than I wanted. "I was just trying to be polite." She leaned in, her face close enough that I could smell the rain in her hair. Her voice dropped to a whisper, trembling but sharp. "You smirked at my pain," she hissed. "You mocked God without saying a word." Then she screamed, sudden, full-throated, shrill enough to rattle the windows. The ramen cup flew from her hand, shattering against the glass case. Scalding broth and noodles splattered across the display in a steamy mess. I lunged for the phone. She stormed out before I could even finish dialing. The glass door slammed shut behind her, the sound echoing through the store before the night swallowed her whole. I just stood there, phone still in my hand, my chest hammering. 10 minutes must have passed before I even moved. No one else came in, just the silence, broken only by the hiss and sputter of the coffee machine. Eventually, I forced myself to clean up the mess. The ramen had left a slick of broth and noodles across the glass case, steam still rising from it, like the scene was refusing to settle. I tried to tell myself maybe she was mentally ill, maybe she was grieving, lost in shock. I wanted to file it away as one of those, "you won't believe this customer" stories, the kind you laugh about with coworkers. But I couldn't. Her words clung to me, the way she'd said them, the look in her eyes. They weren't random. They weren't grief. They were something else. When my shift ended, the sky was just starting to gray. Around 7:15, I walked out back to the parking lot, the world washed clean from the night's rain. Puddles shimmered and the pavement glistened under the early morning light. That's when I froze. Both of my front windows were shattered. Glittering glass lay scattered over the asphalt, my car seats soaked through. My stomach dropped. At first I thought robbery, but nothing was missing, just wrecked, violated. And then I saw it. On the driver's seat sat a photograph, the edges burned black, curling in on themselves. A wedding photo. The couple stood smiling beneath a white arch, but both their faces had been scratched out with something sharp, gouged until the paper tore. On the back, scrawled in red marker, were 3 words: "I see you." My hands shook as I called the police. They came, took the report, bagged the photo. One officer muttered about it probably being tied to a mental health call they'd had recently. A transient woman, unstable. When I described her, one of the younger cops flinched, said he thought he'd seen her walking near the river park, talking to herself. They told me not to worry, said it was likely a one-time thing, but I knew better. That kind of rage doesn't burn out overnight. And the look she'd given me, it hadn't been grief. It had been focus, precision, like I'd become the stand-in for everything she hated. I didn't sleep that night. I kept seeing the photo in my head, the faces clawed out, her question about punishment looping over and over until my mind felt raw. 2 nights later, near the end of my shift, I saw her again. Through the wide glass front windows, out in the parking lot, she stood still as stone. Her coat clung to her skin, her hair matted wet against her face. She didn't move, didn't come in. She just watched. I didn't finish that shift. I called my manager and said I was done. She didn't argue, didn't ask why. She just said, "I understand." A month later, I moved, started working days at a small clinic, graduated from nursing school, tried to build something normal again. I buried the memory under routines, appointments, and paperwork. But every so often something cracks through, a shadow lingering by the gate of my apartment complex. A tall figure in a black coat at the edge of the road when I'm driving home late. Once a woman in the clinic waiting room smiled at me, but her eyes, empty, old, made my blood run cold. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's trauma, paranoia, some echo of that night replaying itself in me. But late at night, when the city goes silent and the hum of the fridge feels like the only sound in the world, I still hear her voice. Do you believe in punishment? And I wonder if it ever stops looking for you. Not every ghost is dead. Some people carry grief like a weapon, pain like a lantern, and they will wander until they find someone to blame. You can offer kindness, but sometimes kindness isn't enough to mend what's already broken. It's strange how one small moment can rip apart the illusion of safety you've been living under. Not a scream, not a chase, not even a violent struggle. Just a calm, almost casual confession from a stranger in a wrinkled gray suit. A whisper that settled in my bones and made me realize nothing was the same after. My name's Carlos Vega. I'm 24, working night shifts at the Circle K off Larkspur Avenue in Henderson, Nevada. I picked up the job to help cover grad school bills, and for the most part, nights were predictable. Quiet stretches of black coffee, small talk with the same regulars, and the occasional teenager trying to run off with an energy drink. I liked it. The solitude of the graveyard hours, the hum of the neon sign flickering against the window, the soft quiet after 2 a.m. when the city finally exhales. But October 3rd, 2022, that night cracked the rhythm. Something walked in that wasn't looking for a soda or a bag of chips. Something walked in that wanted to take away the little bubble of safety I thought I had. Technically, it was Tuesday morning. Most of Henderson was tucked away, the streets half dead under curfew lighting. I'd been on since midnight running on stale coffee, reorganizing the chip rack for the 3rd time, polishing fingerprints off the counter. That store quiet is its own thing, different from daytime noise. It has this hum, a stillness that presses into your chest and leaves too much space for your thoughts to echo. At exactly 2:12 a.m., the automatic door hissed open. I looked up, wiping my hands on a rag. The fluorescent lights caught him first. Tall guy, gray suit, wrinkled like he'd slept in it. His tie was loose, shirt discolored with stains I couldn't name. His eyes had that glassy shine, like he hadn't slept in days, or like he'd just come out the other side of something terrible. He didn't say a word, just drifted between aisles, shoulders slouched, lips moving like he was muttering or arguing with someone who wasn't there. When he finally came up to the counter, he leaned in too close. Close enough that I caught a smell. Bleach maybe, or sour sweat, or something I couldn't place but wanted to step back from. My skin prickled, And then, in this steady voice, almost like he was telling me a secret in church, he said, "I got acquitted, you know. Shot him right through the neck. They said it was an accident. A hunting accident." For a second, my brain shut down. My throat locked. I blinked, staring, thinking, no way this is real. You don't get confessions like that at 2:00 in the morning at a Circle K. I heard myself laugh, thin, nervous, the kind of sound that escapes when you're trying not to scream. Okay. That'll be 3:42. My voice cracked halfway through. He didn't answer, just kept his eyes on me, unblinking. Then he leaned in a little more, lowered his voice and said, "There was no accident." My stomach dropped so fast I thought I'd throw up. He reached into his pocket slow and careful and pulled out a few coins. Exact change. 3 dimes, 4 pennies. He placed each one down on the counter like it mattered, like each coin was part of a ritual. Then he slid them toward me with this faint, deliberate smile. And then he just walked out. Calm, not hurried. Didn't look back. The door slid open, hissed shut, and the hum of the mechanism filled the silence he left behind. I just stood there, staring at the glass doors. My chest tightened, breath coming in shallow little bursts. My hands were shaking when I finally dropped the coins into the register. The coffee machine gurgled behind me, sputtering like it was mocking the silence, and I reached over to shut it off just to make the noise stop. Then I grabbed the phone, crouched behind the counter like a kid hiding, and dialed 911. My voice came out low, almost whispering, like the guy might still be in the store listening. Somebody just admitted to murder, in the store, just now. The dispatcher's tone sharpened. "Sir, can you give me a description?" And I did, every detail I could pull out of my rattled brain. The suit, the eyes, the smell. The way he said there was no accident. Tall, gray suit, glassy eyes, tie hanging loose, shirt stained, no car at the pump. Just him, walking off into the dark. I stayed behind the counter until the cops arrived. 2 cruisers pulled up with lights dimmed, not flashing. The officers were polite, calm in that way that feels rehearsed. They jotted down notes, checked the lot, asked if I could identify him if he came back. One of them shined a flashlight across the pumps into the empty street. Nothing. Just silence swallowing the lot. They told me they'd keep an eye out. But there was no sign of him, just a shadow that seemed to vanish into the night. 2 days later, I almost dropped my coffee when 2 men with badges walked in. Not local cops, FBI field agents, dark suits, trimmed hair, the whole thing. They introduced themselves with steady voices and told me the man I'd seen matched a suspect tied to multiple cold cases. 3 states, violent crimes with a strange pattern, confessions, accidents staged too neatly, evidence that never added up. They asked to see the footage. I brought them into the back and pulled up the security tape. Together we watched the grainy black and white feed. There he was, walking in at 2:12, drifting by the racks, leaning in toward me at the counter. Every line he spoke came through clear enough. Shot him right through the neck. There was no accident. And then him leaving, as calm as he entered, the door sliding shut behind him. The agents exchanged looks but didn't explain. They just said they'd follow up on leads, thanked me for cooperating, and carried a copy of the footage with them. I told myself that was the end of it. But later that week, he came back. It was around 2:05 a.m., 5 minutes before my shift ended. I noticed movement on the security feed, front entrance camera. There he was. Gray suit, tie loose, just standing outside the door, not trying to come in, just waiting. My mouth went dry. I didn't move toward the glass. I didn't try to wave him off. I just locked the door from the inside and stood frozen, eyes flicking between him on the monitor and the dark storefront. He didn't knock, didn't gesture, just stood there for maybe a minute before finally walking away. Back into the night like he'd only wanted me to know he could return whenever he wanted. 2 days later, I quit the night shift. I couldn't do it anymore. I switched to mornings at the Trader Joe's by the interstate, the same hours I used to work part-time in college. The place is busier, safer, people around constantly. I drink more caffeine just to keep up with the pace, but it feels better than being alone in that silent box at 2 a.m. Still, sometimes I catch myself glancing over my shoulder, at the register, stocking shelves, even walking to my car. I picture him again, quiet, confident, smoothing his wrinkled suit, leaning close, whispering another confession in that flat voice. I've made changes. Cameras now cover my apartment porch, new locks on the doors. I don't call it paranoia. I call it trying to take back some ownership of my world. But some nights, lying awake, I'll stare at ceiling shadows and hear the hum of my fridge kick on, and my chest will seize with the thought that it's the Circle K door sliding open and he'll be there again. Gray suit, glassy eyes. There was no accident, but I'm alive. I kept going. Went back to school, finished my first semester, read through CPT chapters with coffee discounts taped in the margins. I've got new lights strung up in my apartment now. I laugh more with people. I function. Yet that night left me with something I never believed before. Fear isn't always a scream in the dark. Sometimes it walks in calmly, tells you the truth in a whisper, and leaves you to carry it. I had just dragged myself through a 12-hour shift waiting tables at the diner off E35. My feet were burning, my back was knotted, and the bun I'd tied neatly that morning now drooped sideways, strands of hair sticking to the sweat on my neck. When I finally pushed through my front door, Ava and Leo were still awake, their eyes glassy and restless from too many popsicles. "Mom, can we get real ice cream?" Ava asked, her small hands clasped together like she was saying a prayer. Leo chimed in, his little voice pitching high. "Please, please, please, Mom." My first instinct was to say no. After a shift like that, I always wanted to say no. My body screamed for the couch, for silence, for sleep. But when I looked at their faces so full of expectation, something in me softened. I glanced toward the window. The night outside looked calm, humid but still. The Circle K down on Cicada Lane glowed like it always did, that red and white sign buzzing faintly. It wasn't even 10 yet, just a short walk. Seemed harmless enough, and maybe the stretch would do me good. "All right," I sighed. "Shoes on, let's walk." I wish I could say I felt something wrong in the air, a warning pressing at the edges of my skin. But it wasn't like that. No shiver, no strange moon, no omen. Just another summer night in Temple, Texas. Halfway down Cicada, I noticed a truck parked beneath a dead street lamp near the gas station lot. Its hood gleamed faintly under the Circle K's lights. As we got closer, a man and woman stepped out from behind it. The man looked ordinary, trustworthy even. Collared shirt, clean hair, the sort of guy you might hand your keys to if your car broke down. The woman, though, was off. Heels too sharp for this cracked sidewalk, a blouse too white, too pressed for nighttime in our dusty town. Together they smiled at us like we were old neighbors. I felt Ava's small hand tense in mine. I pulled her closer without thinking. Leo tugged impatiently on my other arm, pointing at the freezer decal in the Circle K window. "Look, Mom, swirl cones." That's when the man stepped directly into our path. "Evening," he said, smooth, casual, like we'd just bumped into him at church. "Mind if I borrow your wallet?" Before I could even shape a word, a flick of his hand opened a switchblade. The steel caught the neon glow, flashing cold like lightning. My stomach dropped. But what froze me wasn't the blade. It was what I saw over his shoulder. The woman had moved fast, too fast. Her hand was clamped around Leo's wrist, tugging him away. Ava screamed, a sound that split the night wide open. And in that instant, exhaustion vanished. The ache in my back, the heaviness in my feet, it burned away. What was left was pure, raw instinct. I dropped my purse and lunged. My knee drove into the woman's stomach hard enough to knock the air from her. She stumbled, her grip on Leo breaking. He wrenched free and bolted. "Run!" I shouted, my voice sharp enough to cut. Ava grabbed her brother's hand and dragged him toward the store. The man lunged for me, but I caught the edge of a metal trash bin and swung it sideways. The crash echoed like a gunshot. His wrist slammed against the rim, the knife slipping free and clattering across the pavement. He cursed, doubling over, eyes wide in shock. I didn't wait. I didn't check if he'd get back up. They both darted into the alley behind the houses, swallowed by the dark like they'd never been there at all. I stood frozen, arms trembling in midair as if I were still gripping that bin. My chest heaved. The adrenaline buzzed so violently my vision blurred. "Mom!" Ava's voice broke through. She and Leo ran back, both of them crying, clinging to me like they thought I might vanish too. "Are you okay, Mom?" Ava asked, her voice tiny and cracked. I nodded, but the lie sat bitter in my mouth. "Yeah, baby, I'm okay." But I wasn't, not even close. We went inside the Circle K, my pulse still hammering like it didn't know the danger was over. The clerk, a skinny guy in his 20s with acne scars and a nervous twitch in his jaw, froze when he saw me. "Call 911, I told him. My voice sounded flat, like it belonged to someone else entirely. He fumbled for the phone, hands shaking, while my kids clung to my sides. I tried to steady my breathing, but the air inside the store felt heavy, too bright. The police didn't come fast. We sat on the curb outside, Ava pressed against me, Leo's head buried in my lap. 20 minutes passed before a patrol car finally rolled into the lot, lights off, engine slow. I gave my statement, words tumbling out sharper than I meant them. The officer nodded, wrote things down, but his face stayed unreadable. Not urgent, not concerned. Maybe it was the lateness of the hour, maybe just me, a tired waitress with 2 crying kids and no knife wound to make the story bleed enough. The next day, it got worse. A detective called, voice clipped and official. He asked if I'd been involved in an assault the night before. "Yes," I said quickly. "I was assaulted." There was a pause. Then he corrected me. "No, ma'am. A woman filed a report. Says you attacked her without provocation. Claims you tried to rob her." I laughed at first, short and bitter. But his silence told me it wasn't a joke. For 2 weeks, I was under investigation. They picked apart my life piece by piece. My bank account, my credit card bills, my hours at the diner. They asked if I was stressed, if I'd ever snapped at customers, if I had money problems. I could feel the judgment simmering in the air. They didn't say it out loud, but it was there. Single mom, long shifts, kids out late near a gas station. I thought I'd lose everything. My job, my reputation, my kids' sense of safety. Nights stretched long and empty. I barely slept. I sat in the dark, staring at the driveway, sure that truck would reappear. Ava checked the locks 3 times before bed. Leo wet the sheets again after months of being dry. We were unraveling. Then one afternoon, an officer called me back. His tone was different now, less suspicion, more apology. "Footage turned up," he said. "Different gas station, 3 nights before yours. Same couple, same truck, same clothes, different parent, same setup." The words sank in like a stone. It wasn't me they should have been watching. That woman wasn't some poor victim. She and her partner had been circling highways, preying on people too polite, too trusting, too tired to expect the worst. People like me. When the detective finally cleared me, told me I was no longer a suspect, I broke down crying. Not from relief. The relief was shallow, fleeting. I cried because I knew what came next, explaining to my kids why the world was suddenly smaller, meaner, why their innocence had been chipped away by strangers in pressed shirts and fake smiles. I still walk Cicada Lane sometimes, but never at night. I keep my eyes sharp, shoulders tense, keys tight in my grip. I lock my doors the second I'm inside, but I've learned something I didn't know before. You don't have to feel brave to be brave. Fear doesn't matter when it's your kids in the balance. Some threats don't come dressed in shadows or blood. They wear pressed collars, lipstick, perfume. They smile like friends until the moment they strike. So trust your instincts. And if anyone ever dares to threaten your children, forget the quiet, tired version of yourself you think you are. You're a warrior. Use it. It had been almost a year since I'd walked away from the sirens. 8 years as an EMT will either fortify you or hollow you out, and by the end, I was nothing but hollow. There wasn't one dramatic moment that broke me. No pileup of mangled cars, no explosion with body parts in the street. It was slower than that, a steady erosion, the kind you don't notice until you feel yourself collapse from the inside. I left with no plan, just exhaustion. Sold my place in Fort Worth, drifted west where rent was cheaper and nobody expected much from you. I told myself maybe I'd get into vet work, maybe take a class or two. But the truth was, I mostly slept too long, drank too often, and circled the same thoughts that never changed. That's how I ended up at QuickFast, a 24-hour gas station on Route 179, 10 miles out of Weatherford. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid enough and gave me nights to keep busy. Nights were my hours, quiet, slow, no screams, no blood soaking into my boots. The only other body on shift was Russell, mid-50s, built like a refrigerator, but his knees were shot and every step sounded like gravel crunching inside him. We didn't talk much. He stayed in the back counting boxes, old country twanging off his battered flip phone speakers. I didn't mind. Quiet was good. Quiet meant nothing was wrong. But on November 15th, 2022, quiet didn't last. I remember the cold first. Not winter cold, but that wet kind that seeps into your bones and makes your fingers stiff. A drizzle hung in the air, lazy, undecided whether it wanted to fall. The pump stood empty, the road silent, not even crickets trying their luck. It was 11:47 p.m. when the glass door chime broke the stillness. I glanced up from a half-solved crossword, expecting a trucker or maybe some drunk staggering in. Instead, a man stepped inside. Damp hoodie clinging to him, jeans soaked up to the calves, one hand gripping a red plastic gas can. He didn't say a word, just stared past me toward the back of the store. Thin, not gaunt, but wiry in the way men get when they live out of their cars, surviving on gas station coffee and whatever they can scrounge. His face, God, it looked faded, like a photograph that had been rained on. No sharp lines left, just a washed-out face with eyes that seemed to belong to no one. "Pump's not working tonight," I said, making my voice steady, like it was just another customer. "Before you fill, you gotta pay inside." He turned without acknowledging me, slipping into the snack aisle. Past the rotating beef jerky rods, the 2-for-1 cans of Monster. On the overhead camera, I watched him leave a thin trail of rainwater, each step deliberate, too slow. Then he drifted out of frame. I opened my mouth to call out, but Russell's voice rasped through the intercom, low and tight with fear. "Mags, don't move. He's holding something." I froze. "What?" I whispered back. "He's got something in his hand. Saw him by the cooler. Not a gun. Something else. Metal. Big." My fingers hovered under the counter just above the panic button. The silent alarm, the one they told us only to hit if it was life or death. Then the man stepped back into view. This time the axe was in his hand. He held it low, casual. The blade rusted, handle splintered like it had been dragged out of a burned-down shed. But the grip, that grip told me it wasn't for intimidation. He meant to use it. He looked at me then, smiled, just the corner of his mouth twitching upward, as though he'd been here before and already knew how the scene played out. I slammed the button. He didn't react. "You always call them," he said. His voice was soft, rasping like smoke had scorched his throat. "Always the same. Same lights. Same sound. Same look on your face. Something in me jolted. Not memory, but recognition. Not that I knew him, but that he knew me. Or believed he did. He took a step forward, dragging the axe head across the wire racks. Bags of Doritos, Pringles, candy bars toppled one by one. The screech of blade on metal ripped through the store. It wasn't just noise. It was play, a child throwing things from shelves, except every second of it was meant for me. I backed toward the office door behind the counter, keeping my hands visible. "Sir, look," I said, steady as I could. "You don't need to. Whatever's going on, we can—" The axe came down, hard, slammed into the counter not 5 inches from my hand. The laminate cracked like dry bone. I stumbled back, shoved myself into the office and locked the door. Russell was already on the floor. His face was ashen, one hand clutching his shoulder, blood soaking through his sleeve. "He got me," he gasped. His breath hitched. Didn't see him swing. Too fast. I slid him against the filing cabinet, heart pounding, and fumbled for the phone. My fingers were shaking as I dialed 911. "911, what's your emergency?" The dispatcher's voice was clipped, calm. I forced the words out. "Our address. Armed suspect. 1 injured." "He's still inside," I whispered. "We're locked in the office. There's blood." "Stay on the line," she said. "Officers are on the way. 9 minutes." 9 minutes. It felt like 9 hours. Out in the store, the man began humming. Slow, aimless, the kind of tune a child makes when they don't know the song. "You always call them," he muttered, voice drifting between himself and us. On the grainy black and white monitor, I watched him pace the aisles, the axe dragging along the tile behind him like a leash he had all the time in the world to tug. Every few seconds he'd stop mid-step, sniff the air like a dog catching a scent, then tilt his head sharply, listening for something only he could hear. Russell groaned beside me, low and wet. I pressed my palm against his wound, felt the sticky warmth seep between my fingers. No arterial spray, thank God. Probably muscle. Bad, but survivable, if we got through the next 10 minutes. The man stopped directly in front of the office door. He leaned down until his face hovered inches from the glass, fogging it with each slow exhale. It was the casualness that unsettled me most, like he was checking on something baking in the oven. His lips moved again. "You don't remember me," he whispered, "but I remember you." I didn't answer. Couldn't. My body had gone rigid. One hand stayed clamped over Russell's shoulder, the other gripped the phone receiver so tightly it felt like if I loosened it, it might bite me. He tapped the glass once with the flat of the axe head. Not a swing, not even forceful, just a sharp ping that echoed in the tiny office. Then he cocked his head at me, bird-like, watching the way you'd watch a rabbit stumble in the grass. "Maggie Dorset," he said. The sound of my name almost stopped my heart. I hadn't worn a tag since my first month at QuickFast. It scratched my neck, and nobody on Graveyard cared who you were. I never said my name aloud to strangers. Never. "You patched up my brother, 2018. Southbound 820 near Bryant Irvin. Red Civic. He was bleeding out. You told him he'd be fine." I tried to force the memory out of the fog of adrenaline. My brain spun, useless, flipping through hundreds of calls, faces blurred together in blood and flashing lights. Nothing stuck. "I remember," he said, almost smiling now. He wasn't fine. He began pacing again, each step heavy like he was tethered to the ground. "I found the report online. Said his liver was ruptured. Said there was nothing you could have done." He stopped. His face twitched, the faint curl of a smile breaking into something harder. "I read that line 500 times. Nothing you could have done." That's when I realized. This man wasn't just unhinged. He was stuck, trapped in one night years ago, replaying it until it hardened into hate. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice shaking. "That means I tried. I swear I tried. I don't remember everything, but if I was there, if I said—" Russell shifted with a wince, drawing my eyes for half a second. Blood still leaked, but slower now. He'd hold on. The man chuckled. The sound was thin, strangled, like someone choking on a laugh only they understood. "You were calm," he rasped, held his hand, told him he'd make it. His eyes darkened. His voice dropped into something guttural. "You lied." I didn't even realize I'd moved until I felt cold metal against my leg. I'd crouched behind the filing cabinet, clutching Russell's aluminum bat like it was a cross. The dispatcher's voice crackled faintly through the receiver. "Ma'am, officers are approaching. Can you confirm the suspect's position?" "He's just outside the office door," I whispered. "Talking to us." "Do not engage. Stay quiet. Officers will announce when they enter." Another ping hit the glass. Louder this time. He leaned closer, fogging the pain with his breath. "I thought about a gun," he murmured. "Cleaner, quicker. But it's not about quick. It's about remembering. You don't just walk away. You don't get to be someone else." Sirens wailed in the distance, faint but rising, crawling closer. My chest tightened with relief. His expression never shifted. Calm. Certain. "You don't get to be someone else," he repeated, softer now. "Not after what you do." Then, without warning, he turned, walked away, calmly, casually, like he'd forgotten what he came in for. I watched him on the monitor, the grainy footage making him ghost-like as he slipped past the coolers and pushed open the fire exit. The alarm screamed through the store. By the time the cops stormed in, he was gone. Russell survived. 6 stitches, a mild concussion, and bruises that would fade. The cops combed the store for hours, replayed the tape frame by frame. They found the axe near the employee break room, caked with rust and streaked with blood. The handle bore the faint etching of Station 34. Station 34, 5 minutes from where I used to run calls. I'd parked my rig there more times than I could count. Drank stale coffee in their kitchen, once broke down crying in their laundry room after a baby we couldn't save. That firehouse had been shut down 2 years back. Budget cuts. When I asked the officer if they'd ID'd him, he shook his head. Ghost. No prints, no ID, nothing in the system. Axe was reported missing 6 months ago. Russell never came back to QuickFast after that night. Took a security job in Fort Worth instead. I quit 2 days later. They offered counseling, a hotline, a card signed by corporate. It felt like trying to patch a skull fracture with a Band-Aid. But what haunted me wasn't the axe or the wound or even his words. It was his smile. That slight curl, the look that said, "You don't remember me, but I've never stopped watching you." It's been almost 3 years now. I rent a small studio above a laundromat on the edge of Wichita Falls. Mornings, I feed stray cats and clean cages at the shelter. It's quiet, the kind of quiet you only get with age and distance. But I don't go into gas stations after dark, not even to use the bathroom. Every time I see a man in a hoodie near a storefront, the coil tightens in my gut. The memory rises like steam off old blood. Trauma isn't the clean story people think. Flashbacks, nightmares. Sometimes it's just noticing how every convenience store hums the same way. How the jerky racks always stand in the same place. How some things never change no matter how far you run. I still check every aisle. Still watch every exit when I pump gas. And late at night when someone walks through a door too slowly, I find myself holding my breath. The worst part is he never came back. He didn't need to. Because the story was never about what he did. It was about what he left inside me. Some wounds don't bleed. Some monsters don't hide under beds. They walk in when you're too tired to see them coming. And the scariest part of survival is realizing the story didn't end. You just got away first. People think the hardest part of night shifts is the chaos. The drunks who stumble in, the fistfights over nothing, the guy who swears at you because his scratch-off expired last month. But that's not what wears you down. It's the quiet. That eerie stillness between midnight and 3 a.m., when the rest of the world feels like it's forgotten you exist. It seeps into your skin, makes you doubt what you're seeing, like your own reflection staring back at you from the soda fridge glass, eyes a fraction too slow to follow. I've always been more comfortable awake at night. Growing up, silence meant safety. My dad was a mean drunk and my mom was gone by the time I turned 12. Staying awake past midnight wasn't rebellion. It was self-preservation. I learned to love the dark because the dark didn't expect anything from me. Years later, when my boyfriend of 4 years cheated and bailed the same week rent came due, nights became survival again. Any shift I could grab, I took. The Beacon Gas Express on Mulberry Ridge paid like crap, but they didn't ask questions. I clocked in, stocked shelves, and clocked out. That was enough. But the problem with quiet jobs is you start noticing things that shouldn't be noticed. The way a display shifts an inch overnight. The pump light that flickers like someone standing just out of sight. After 6 weeks on the job, I was used to the oddities. Still, that October Saturday started heavy with unease. Too many neon cans crammed into the cooler, the outside camera dead again, and that one flickering pump bathing the lot in jittery light. It was 12:22 a.m. when the bell over the door chimed. I looked up from my crossword. A man walked in, tall, late 40s, salt and pepper hair cut sharp, face smooth-shaven like he belonged in a cologne ad. He wore a long dark coat and leather gloves, way too polished for a back-road gas station, and he didn't buy a thing. "Slow night?" he asked, voice steady, almost rehearsed. "Pretty much dead," I said, forcing a shrug. He didn't smile. Not really. He leaned against the counter, watching me like he was waiting for something unsaid. Then came the questions. "You from around here?" "Not really," I answered. "Ever get nervous working alone?" I shrugged again, polite, non-committal. "You like being seen?" That one snagged me. His tone wasn't small talk, it felt pointed, personal. I laughed weakly, brushed it off. "You always close by yourself?" he pressed. "No," I lied. "Co-workers are out back smoking." His head tilted slightly. "Right, the tall guy in the red shirt." I froze. There was no co-worker, no red shirt. No one else had been in all night. He tapped the counter twice, deliberate, and walked out without another word. The second the door shut, I bolted to the back room and locked it. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Weird people wander into gas stations. It comes with the territory. But this wasn't just weird. This was wrong. I pulled up the lot feed on the old monitor. Static. The outside camera had been glitching for weeks, but this was total snow, black and white buzzing. I smacked the side of the monitor. Nothing. Minutes crawled by. My pulse finally slowed, but something gnawed deeper than fear. A sense of recognition, like his face wasn't new, like I'd seen him before, in a dream, or maybe a warning I hadn't understood. At 12:58, the bell chimed again. I nearly jumped out of my skin. It was him. And this time, he brought someone else. The woman at his side was tall, wrapped in a beige trench coat, scarf cinched at her jaw. Her blonde hair framed sharp cheekbones, lips painted dark. She smiled the instant her eyes found mine, warm and practiced. "Hey," she said brightly. "Pays real benefits, you'd be perfect. We're hiring for a new media startup. Remote work. Great opportunity." I blinked. "I'm not really looking right now." She leaned in, smile fixed, voice syrup sweet. "Just let me show you the site. Totally legit. 5 minutes outside. Once in a lifetime deal." Something about her felt off, like a stage actor forcing lines, the strings of the puppet just barely visible. I glanced at the monitor behind me. No car at the pumps, but out past the floodlight's edge, deep in the tree line, 2 pinpoints. Headlights, no engine noise, no movement. "Yeah." I forced a nervous smile. "I'm gonna have to call my manager real quick." Her face twitched, barely, but enough. A tiny flinch she tried to cover with that perfect smile. He stepped closer, too close, his presence pressing against me like a shadow I couldn't shake. His voice dropped, low but sharp enough to cut through the hum of the cooler. "You should have come the first time, now you've wasted our time." Before I could answer, before my brain even caught up, the bell over the door rang again. A family walked in, a mom and dad, mid-30s, with 2 kids no older than 10. The kids shot straight for the candy aisle, grabbing at shelves like they'd been freed from some invisible cage. The whole scene felt like a hallucination, so ordinary it cracked the tension in half. The woman in the scarf adjusted her coat and instantly flipped back to cheerful. "Have a good night," she said brightly, like nothing strange had just passed between us. And then they were gone. No glance back, no muttered goodbye. Just 2 shadows slipping through the door and disappearing into the dark. I stayed frozen behind the counter, silent, while the family shopped. My throat was too tight to form words. When they finally left, I shut the door behind them, twisted the lock, and slid the chain across. Even though it was against policy. Screw the rules. I didn't care anymore. I just needed the night to end. The rest of the shift dragged like a fever dream. I kept glancing out the windows, half expecting headlights to flare from the trees again. The security feed still buzzed with static, no matter how many times I smacked the side of the monitor. 3 times, I lifted the phone and pretended to call my manager, holding it to my ear for minutes at a time in case they were watching, in case they came back. They didn't. When I finally stumbled home, I didn't sleep. I lay on the couch with the blinds drawn, TV muted, replaying every detail in my head. The way he knew I was alone, the way her smile never cracked even when I told her no, the headlights deep in the woods, that unnatural stillness. 2 days later, a cop came by. It was late afternoon, just before another shift. He was clean-cut, uniform crisp, not much older than me. "Officer Lindell," he said. He was following up on a report about a missing woman from a gas station 2 towns over. Last seen around midnight. Talking to a couple. A tall man in a dark coat, a blonde woman in a scarf. He said carefully, watching me for any reaction. My stomach dropped. I told him everything, every word, every look. He scribbled notes while I talked, too fast, like he already knew the story. Then he asked to see the camera feed. I led him to the back. Of course, the monitor was working perfectly now. The exterior footage from that night, still corrupted, nothing but snow. He jotted it down anyway. "You did the right thing," he told me before leaving. "These folks move around, they never hit the same place twice, but they leave breadcrumbs." I didn't ask what that meant. 3 nights later, I found the word "liar" sprayed across the back service door in thick red paint. It was 6:03 a.m., just as I was finishing another shift. I filed a report, but the manager brushed it off as kids messing around. Graffiti wasn't unusual, he claimed, even though our store had never had a single tag in the 3 years it had been open. I knew better. The lines were too sharp, too deliberate, too personal. The next morning, I put in for day shifts only. No exceptions. Some of the staff rolled their eyes, said I was being paranoid. An assistant manager even smirked when I explained. "You watch too many crime shows, yo," he joked. But he signed off on the change. I lasted 3 more weeks. Then a story broke on the local news. A burned-out car had been found in the woods near Silva. The body inside was unrecoverable, but investigators identified scraps of fabric, scarf material, coat lining, matching descriptions from multiple gas station reports. The couple was never found. I never worked another night shift. 3 months later, I moved to Boone. Took a front desk job at a dog kennel. Still minimum wage, still long hours, but with windows, people, and locks I could trust. I keep the store's old key in my junk drawer, sealed in a Ziploc bag with the word "Remember" scrawled across it. Because what happened to me wasn't a story. It wasn't some close call to laugh about later. It was a pattern that almost claimed me. A pattern that still haunts places where the world falls quiet, where the cameras break, where the lights flicker above Pump 4. where tree lines hide headlights with engines that never start. Sometimes I wonder how many others they approached. How many said yes? How many never got the chance to quit? If something feels wrong, it is. Trust your gut. Trust the unease in your bones. The world doesn't always scream its dangers. Sometimes it whispers them, hoping you'll ignore the sound. Don't. I've always believed that places carry memory, not the kind carved into plaques or street signs, but something heavier, something that clings to the air like smoke after a fire. Ridgeway was one of those places, a town that didn't want to be remembered, yet refused to let go once you stumbled into it. I'd been drifting for 3 weeks, living out of a cheap rental with no real plan, chasing a half-finished article that no editor had actually asked for. My pitch, at least to myself, was simple. Dying towns, the quiet gaps between highway exits, the places you blink past without stopping. Truth was, I wasn't chasing a story. I wanted to dissolve into one. By the time I turned off onto Old Timber Road, the snow was coming down sideways, a restless static across my windshield. Then Ridgeway appeared, if you could call it that. The fuel stop looked more like a mirage than a place of business. Its red paint had peeled back in long curls from the wood like scabs lifting from old skin. One buzzing light above the door flickered weakly, spilling a thin yellow glow over the cracked concrete stoop. I was running on fumes, gas and otherwise. Inside, the place smelled faintly of scorched coffee grounds and old motor oil. No music, no radio chatter, just the silence and the low hum of a freezer chest in the back. Behind the counter sat a young woman, mid-20s maybe, pale-skinned with messy blonde hair knotted low at her neck. She didn't bother to look up when I stepped in, just nodded once and turned a page of the paperback in her hands. I grabbed jerky, 2 bottled waters, and poured black coffee from a thermal pot that looked like it had survived the Carter administration. I was halfway to the counter when the door groaned open behind me. 2 men walked in, hunting camo. Heavy boots caked with dried mud that cracked off in flakes as they moved. One was tall and thin, sharp angles under his jacket. The other shorter, thick through the shoulders, the kind of build that clung to you years after football. They didn't browse. They didn't even glance at the shelves. They just looked at me. "Out of town?" the tall one asked, though it wasn't really a question. I gave a short nod. "Just passing through?" He grinned, but it carried no warmth. "Road's about to ice over." "I'll take my chances," I muttered, moving toward the counter. The woman scanned my items slowly, methodically. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Don't hang around here too long." She didn't look at me when she said it. I paid in cash, something I almost never did, and the silence seemed to follow me out into the cold. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. The pump was dead. I slid my card in. Nothing. Tried again. The screen flickered once, then went black. The nozzle was fused to its holster, like it hadn't been touched in weeks. I turned back toward the store. The hunters were still there, exactly where I'd left them. But the cashier, the girl, was gone. I stepped inside again. "Hey," I called. "Pump's not working." No answer. The taller man tilted his head, voice smooth but oddly hollow. "She's out back." It wasn't what he said, it was the way he said it. Too steady, too practiced. Like a line he'd said 100 times before, without bothering to make it sound real. My stomach dropped. "She didn't even have a coat," I muttered, mostly to myself. Neither man moved. I backed out slowly, hands open at my sides like I didn't want trouble. Outside, the snow had thickened into a curtain. I could barely make out the tree line anymore. That's when I saw it. Movement at the corner of the building. Someone peeking around the edge. Her. She lifted one hand, waved once, then ducked out of sight. I moved fast but careful, forcing myself not to run, crunching through the snow until I rounded the corner. She was pressed tight against the brick, breath fogging in sharp bursts. "Here," she whispered urgently. Her eyes darted toward the front of the store. "Don't let them box you in. They're not from here." Her voice was sharp, almost bitten off. I looked past her shoulder and froze. Another truck sat just beyond the property line, half sunken in the snow. No headlights, no sound. The license plate had been wrapped in duct tape. That was when my stomach turned cold. "What the hell's going on?" I whispered. "You don't want to know," she said quickly, backing a step away like the words themselves might burn her. "You hesitate. You're done. Just get in your car and go. Don't wait, or they'll follow." I didn't think. I bolted across the icy lot, shoes sliding out from under me, arms flailing to keep balance. My fingers shook so hard I nearly dropped the keys. Somehow I jammed them into the lock, yanked the door open, and tumbled inside. The door slammed shut just as I threw the car into reverse. The tires screamed against the frozen ground. I fishtailed, clipped a snowbank hard enough to jolt my teeth, then straightened out. In the rear view, I caught sight of one of the hunters stepping outside, head tilted like he was curious, not hurried. The second followed close behind, something heavy and metallic dangling from his hand. A pipe, maybe, or a crowbar. I didn't wait to find out. I stomped the gas. Snow churned up behind me, blanketing the mirror in white blur. My gas light had already been glowing when I pulled into Ridgeway. I was running on fumes, but I couldn't stop. Not until I saw real light. Not until I was sure I was back in the world. For the next 20 miles, I didn't check my mirrors. Didn't even blink too long. The road stretched on in front of me, a black ribbon lost inside a storm of white static. No signs, no towns, just noise and fear pressing in tight around me. When I finally coasted into the next gas station, I almost sobbed with relief. Bright LED signage lit up the parking lot, a family unloading snacks into a minivan under the glow. Civilization. My gauge read 3 miles to empty. I stumbled inside the convenience store, phone already in hand, and called the county sheriff. The dispatcher answered casual, bored, like she'd done it 1,000 times. But the second I gave her the name, Ridgeway Fuel Stop, there was a pause. A silence that stretched too long. "You sure that's the place?" she asked finally. "Yes," I said quickly. Red building on Timber Road, 2 guys in camo, blonde girl behind the counter, early 20s, quiet. Her tone changed, flattened. "Sir, that station's been closed since August. Electrical fire. The girl working that night didn't make it. Elena Sanders. You must be mistaken." The name hit like a stone to the chest. I almost dropped the phone. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I sat in that gas station parking lot until dawn, doors locked, engine running, eyes burning holes into the empty road. Every time a pair of headlights appeared in the distance, my gut knotted tight. Around 3 a.m., needing to ground myself in something solid, I pulled the receipt from my coat pocket. Proof, anything. But the paper was blank. Not smudged, not faded, just twisted ink, bled into black static, unreadable. The coffee cup in my console still had Ridgeway's logo, but even that looked wrong, faded, discolored, like it had been sitting in some back room for years. I searched online with what little battery I had left. Ridgeway Fuel Stop, the fire, August 3rd, 2022. 6 months ago to the day. An article with a photo. Elena Sanders. Same blonde hair. Same paperback novel stacked on the counter behind her. Same half smirk that never quite touched her eyes. My stomach heaved. I slammed the laptop shut and sat in silence until the battery finally drained. I don't tell that story anymore. Tried once, drunk at a bar in Pittsburgh, and some guy just laughed, asked what I'd been on. I don't write about Ridgeway either. It's the chapter I cut out, the ghost story that stuck too close to the skin. Thing is, I've seen forgotten places before. Towns that crumble, rest stops swallowed by weeds, outposts on the edges of America where the lights don't stay lit. But Ridgeway was different. Ridgeway wasn't forgotten. Ridgeway was waiting. And something else was waiting inside it. Sometimes I dream about Elena. She's behind the counter, same as before, flipping a page, lifting her eyes just long enough to whisper something I can never quite hear. I've stopped trying to understand what Ridgeway was, or is. Some things don't need to be explained. They just need to be remembered, long enough to never go back. Some places don't die. They wait. So if you're out there, on some long stretch of highway, and the road feels too quiet, the air too still, trust your instincts. Not every exit is meant to be taken, and not every place marked on a map still belongs to the world. I'm not the kind of person who talks much. Not in groups, not online, not even to the neighbors whose names I've never bothered to learn. I've always preferred staying out of notice. That's partly why I ended up working nights at Northside Fuel Mart on Holland Avenue, just outside Erie. Nights are quiet. Nights don't demand conversation. They don't push you into small talk or force you to wear a fake smile. I took the job because I needed something that wouldn't crush me the way restaurants and offices did. Anxiety made it impossible to stick to those places. Too many bodies crammed in, too much noise, too many eyes. But a gas station after midnight, where maybe 2 or 3 people came through an hour, that I could handle. It was mid-April, but winter wasn't ready to let go. The kind of cold where your breath still shows in the air. My coworker Todd had called out sick, flu supposedly, and the manager practically begged me to cover graveyard. I didn't want to, but I needed the hours. And honestly, I figured the shift would be nothing. Coffee refills, a pack of Marlboros for some guy on his way to third shift. The usual. By 2 a.m., the rain had finally stopped. The station looked like a faded photograph, harsh fluorescent lights glowing down on slick asphalt, puddles reflecting the canopy like smeared mirrors. A vending machine by the ice chest hummed softly, filling the silence in a way that almost felt too loud. I was behind the counter halfway through reorganizing the cigarette shelf. The little TV bolted above the fridge, muttering through an old true crime doc. I wasn't paying much attention until I saw headlights swing across the glass. A white pickup, mid-2000s Ford maybe, rolled into pump 6 and just sat there. I waited for the sound of the pump clicking on. It never came. At first I thought maybe he'd forgotten his wallet or was digging something out of the bed, but the truck didn't move. No door opened. Nothing. Finally, after almost a full minute, the driver's door creaked open. A man stepped out. He didn't grab his phone. He didn't start fueling. He just stood there beside the pump like he'd arrived early for something and was waiting to be told what to do. I figured maybe he'd come inside to pay cash. He didn't. 5 minutes dragged by, then 10. Still no movement toward the station. Just him, standing under the pump light, his face hidden beneath the shadow of a cap and the hood of a black jacket. His hands stayed shoved deep in his pockets. He was staring at the store. At me, probably. I leaned forward and hit the intercom. "Hey, sir. Need help out there?" The sound crackled through the speakers outside. No response. He didn't flinch, didn't look around, didn't even blink from what I could see. Instead, he started walking. Not toward the door. He circled the pump. Slow, deliberate, like he was measuring something invisible. He didn't glance at the price display or the handle. Just kept pacing, same loop, over and over. That's when my stomach tightened in that way you can't explain. The kind of instinct that creeps in before your brain has words for it. Something wasn't right. Then he tilted his head up. His eyes went straight to the security camera mounted above the pump. And he smiled. Not a polite smile. Not the sort you give when someone lets you cut ahead in line. This one was wrong. Crooked. A slow pull of the mouth up one side while the rest of his face stayed locked and lifeless, like only part of him had learned what smiling was supposed to look like. I didn't even notice I'd moved until the cool metal of the ice cream cooler pressed against my back. My breath left me in a shaky mutter. Nope. I ducked into the back office, slammed the door shut, and twisted the lock. The sound of it catching was the first relief I'd felt since he stepped out of that truck. The office had a bank of monitors wired to the cameras. I flipped to the feed for Pump 6. There he was, still circling, still smiling up at the lens like he knew I was watching. That's when I saw it. The passenger side door. It wasn't shut, just open a crack, barely an inch, but enough. Enough to see the outline of someone slumped in the passenger seat. Long hair spilled forward, pale face half hidden, utterly still. I leaned closer to the monitor, squinting hard. Could have been a woman. Could have been a mannequin tossed there to rot. Could have been a body. Before I could decide which, the lights flickered just once. But it was enough. The monitors went black, then blinked back on a second later. When they did, my stomach clenched. He was gone. No chime from the front door. No footsteps. No engine. Just silence so complete it pressed in on my ears. I whipped my eyes toward the back monitor. Nothing. My chest tightened. I scanned the lot feed. Truck still parked. Passenger door shut now. My throat went dry. That meant he was somewhere between me and that truck. Then, knock, not from the front, from the back door. The staff door, the one I had locked. I froze, every breath suspended. Another knock, harder this time, rattling through the thin office walls, then scratching. Slow, deliberate. Something hard dragging across the metal, grating like nails on bone. My phone was already in my grip. My voice came out a whisper. 911, please. I think someone's trying to break in. The dispatcher's tone was steady, practiced calm. Officers were 5, maybe 6 minutes away. Stay on the line. Stay in the office. Don't move. I nodded even though she couldn't see me, eyes fixed on the locked door like it might dissolve if I blinked. The scratching stopped. My heart thudded loud enough to drown out the vending machine hum. Then, ping. Motion alert. Pump 2. I spun to the monitor. There he was again, strolling toward the truck like he'd just remembered he had somewhere else to be. Slow, casual, no rush at all. He climbed in, closed the door, and pulled away, taillights glowing dull red until they shrank down Holland Avenue and slipped into the dark. By the time the officers arrived, I was still shaking so hard I had to grip the counter to stand steady. They took my statement, asked if I recognized the guy. I shook my head, checked the cameras with them. When they ran the plates, the result twisted my stomach tighter. Stolen, 3 hours west. Then one officer pulled up earlier footage I hadn't looked at. About an hour before he pulled up to Pump 6, the truck was already there, across the street, parked with the lights off. A black shape, engine cold, just sitting in the dark facing the station. They zoomed in. You could barely make out the driver, head tilting once, then again. Watching. Waiting. What about the passenger? I asked, though my throat was dry enough to crack. The officer froze the frame, leaned closer, then muttered. Hard to say. Could have been a mannequin. Could have been someone unconscious. Could have been worse. They canvassed the blocks around, checked a few motel lots. Nothing. No sign of the truck. No sign of him. No ID match. No license trace. Just gone. I still work at Northside. I still take night shifts, but never alone. That was the deal I struck with myself. Manager didn't argue. Cops didn't either. And nothing's happened since. Not exactly like that. But sometimes, a truck pulls in late, sits at a pump, and doesn't move. Doesn't fuel. Doesn't send anyone inside. And I watch. Not for the face. Not for the smile. I watch for the stillness. For the ones who just sit. Because I've learned something I wish I hadn't. Not everyone who pulls up to a gas station is there for gas. Some are hiding. Some are hunting. Some only want to be seen just once before they vanish again. And me? I lock the back door first, always, because danger doesn't need dark alleys or haunted houses. Sometimes it waits in places too ordinary to question, until you do. Stay sharp. Trust your gut. And never ignore the ones who stand too long under the light, doing everything except what they came for. I don't usually drive at night. I hate the way the dark presses in on the road, how the headlights carve out a tunnel and everything beyond it feels swallowed, erased, like I'm the last person alive. But that Saturday, I didn't really have a choice. Jess had thrown one of her famous movie nights again, and this one was all horror films. She's the kind of friend who insists on just one more, until suddenly the credits are rolling, and you realize the sun's almost due back up. I'd promised my grandma I'd be home by 10. By the time I finally pulled out of Jess's driveway, it was creeping past 11:30. Normally, I'd stick to Highway 9, familiar, wide, bright with street lights every 100 feet. Safe. But there was construction blocking most of it off, and my GPS forced me onto the old back roads. Roads I hadn't touched since high school, riding shotgun while my cousin blasted music and sped curves he shouldn't have. I was already worn down, stomach empty, eyelids heavy, when the gaslight blinked on. My gut sank. Grandma always warned me never to let the tank run too low. "You don't know what kind of trouble you'll find on these roads," she'd say. I used to laugh, but now, alone in the dark with the woods pressing in tight like they were leaning to whisper, her words didn't feel so funny. Then, up ahead, light. A glowing sign, flickering like a moth trapped in glass. Franklin Fuel Stop. It looked half dead even from the road. The lot was cracked, weeds snaking through the concrete. A single car sat by the air pump, a black sedan, door shut, no lights, no movement. Still, I slowed. 5 minutes, I told myself. Just enough to fill up, grab something cold to drink, then I'd be gone. The door chimed when I pushed inside. No music, no background chatter, just a weak buzzing from a bad fluorescent tube and the hum of a cooler against the wall. Behind the counter sat an older man in a faded green flannel. His stubble was days old, his pencil tapping against a crossword like he'd been stuck on the same clue forever. "Hey," I murmured. He barely lifted his eyes. The smell hit next. Old mop water and burned coffee grounds. One fridge with sodas, a short shelf of dusty snacks. No hot food, no Slurpee machine. I grabbed a Dr. Pepper and a granola bar and carried them to the counter. "Pump still work?" I asked. He looked up like I'd asked him something personal. Finally said, "Cash only." I slid a 10 across. He nodded once, no smile, no small talk. Transaction over. The night air outside felt different. Heavy, like it knew something I didn't. I turned toward my car and stopped cold. The sedan's driver door was hanging open. I hadn't heard anyone. No footsteps on gravel. It had been closed when I went in. My keys dug into my palm as I hurried to my car, popped the tank, shoved the nozzle in. Every few seconds my eyes jumped to the shadows, back to the open sedan door, then to the tree line pressing close. That's when I heard him. "You from around here?" He was just there, 10 feet away. Tall, standing still, jeans dark, jacket zipped all the way up, ball cap pulled low. I hadn't heard him approach. No crunch of gravel, no breath. I cleared my throat, tried to sound casual. "Just passing through." He tilted his head slightly like he was studying me. "Out here alone. These roads," he said, his voice low, even. "Not safe. Girl shouldn't stop. Won't be long. You don't look like you're in a rush." The pump clicked and I nearly sobbed with relief. I yanked the nozzle free, jammed it back into the cradle, and spun toward him. He was closer now, close enough that I could see the faint stubble shadowing his jaw. "You waiting on someone?" he asked, voice flat. "No." "You sure?" I stepped back, angling toward my car door. "Yeah, I'm sure." My phone was still inside. So was my purse. All I had was the sharp edge of my keys clenched in my fist. I darted a glance at the window of the station, hoping for backup. The clerk's chair was empty. The faint glow inside flickered once and vanished. plunging the whole front into darkness. My breath caught, my chest hurt. Then my eyes landed on something worse. My passenger door was cracked open. I hadn't touched it. "Back off," I snapped, louder this time. The sound of my own voice betrayed me, pitched too high. He didn't move. Then the sedan's headlights flared to life behind him, flooding the lot with a cold glare. Someone was sitting in the driver's seat, perfectly still, just watching. That was it. I didn't think. My body just moved. I dove into my car, slammed the door, hit the lock, and jammed the gear shift into reverse. The tires screamed against the concrete, rubber burning, as I shot backward. I nearly took out the rusted mailbox by the exit. My heart hammered so violently it drowned out the engine. My hands were shaking so badly the steering wheel rattled under my grip. I didn't look back. Not once. Not until I hit the 2-lane that bent toward the state road. No headlights in the mirror. Nothing trailing me. I didn't stop until 12 miles later, when the yellow glow of a Dollar General sign cut through the dark. I swerved into the lot, stumbled out of the car, and ran inside. The kid at the counter looked like I'd dropped a bomb when I begged him to call the cops. 20 minutes crawled by before an officer showed. I spilled everything in a rush. The station, the man, the sedan, the door. He wrote it all down, calm and methodical, then called for another unit to check the place out. When he returned, his face told me the answer before his words did. He shook his head slowly. "Ma'am," he said, "careful, steady. Franklin fuel stop's been closed for months. No permits, no utilities. It's been off the grid since April. You didn't walk into a gas station tonight. You walked into a building someone's squatting in." I asked about the black sedan, about the man, about the crossword puzzle on the counter. They found nothing. No car, no clerk, no lights, no hum of a cooler. Just a hollow, dark building with broken shelves and dust. No cameras, no trace. "You're lucky," they told me. Probably scared them off. I nodded, but I didn't believe it. I didn't sleep when I got home. Not really. I locked every door, turned on every light, sat with my knees pulled up to my chest. Even when my body finally gave in and I dozed for an hour or two, I woke with the same thought. I hadn't escaped, not completely. When morning came, I forced myself outside to check the car. I needed proof, some scrap of evidence that it wasn't just exhaustion playing tricks on me. That's when I saw it. A napkin, folded neatly, tucked into the side pocket of my passenger door. My stomach flipped. My hands shook as I unfolded it. The handwriting was jagged, uneven. 4 words. "You left the back unlocked." I stood in my driveway for what felt like forever, staring at it, cold washing over me in waves. It's still in my drawer. I couldn't throw it away. Not yet, not ever. I haven't driven alone at night since. I don't take shortcuts. I don't let my tank dip below half. Because some places aren't abandoned. They're waiting. And danger doesn't always scream. It watches. It waits. And it slips into your passenger seat the moment you forget how close it really is. Trust your gut. Lock your doors. And don't ignore the signs, especially the quiet ones. I've always been more at ease with silence than with small talk. Numbers don't judge, don't twist meanings, don't leave you second-guessing yourself at 3 in the morning. A spreadsheet is clean, logical. People, not so much. That's not me being bitter. It's just the truth. I'm a data analyst, the kind of guy who can disappear into rows and formulas so thoroughly that whole evenings evaporate without me noticing. I've always been better with numbers than feelings. After the divorce last winter, though, the silence shifted. It wasn't peace anymore. It was emptiness. Rooms that once held background noise, her voice on a late phone call, the shower running, the clink of plates, were dead quiet. Too quiet. So I started staying later at the office, not because deadlines demanded it, but because it gave me something, anything, to fill the hours. Most nights I stayed well past midnight in the remote satellite office out in Forest Lake. The building emptied at 5, and after that it was just me, the glow of 2 monitors, and the faint hum of an HVAC system that seemed to breathe heavier at night. This was early July, the kind of sticky, airless night when even the insects seemed too tired to move. I'd been hunched at my desk since 5 that evening, tinkering with data models for a Thursday client presentation. By 2 in the morning, my eyes burned like sandpaper, and a knot had twisted itself deep between my shoulder blades. I stood, stretched, and realized if I didn't get something to drink, I was going to pass out right there at the keyboard. The vending machines in the building had been out of order for weeks. I thought of the little Shell station by the lake, maybe a quarter-mile down the road, just off the tree line near the old reservoir. The reservoir had dried up 2 summers ago, leaving behind a cracked basin of weeds and algae that stank when the wind carried it wrong. That gas station had always looked half abandoned, even on a bright afternoon. At night it was worse, just a faint glow through thinning pines, 2 tired old pumps standing like crooked teeth, and signage that flickered like it was barely holding on. Still, it was the only option. I grabbed my wallet and keys, told myself it'd be a 5-minute trip at most, and drove over. I pulled in beside the second pump. The canopy lights overhead buzzed with an uneven flicker, like they resented having to stay alive at this hour. The building was low and squat, its glass front streaked with grime. A faded open sign in the corner struggled to stay half-lit. When I stepped inside, the door didn't chime. Instead, it gave off that metallic buzz, something between a mosquito and a dying fluorescent bulb, the kind of sound you hear in diners that haven't been renovated since the 70s. The store was dim, a couple of overhead tubes casting yellow light that looked sick more than warm. A single cooler along the far wall hummed, steady but too loud in the stillness. No music, no radio, no clerk's voice calling a greeting. Just silence, except for a faint rhythmic beeping. I heard it the second I crossed the threshold, subtle but sharp, each tone landing the same distance apart, too measured to be random, too mechanical to ignore. It came from the back corner near the shelf of cleaning supplies. Behind the counter sat the clerk. Older guy, maybe late 50s. Wiry frame, beard shot through with gray. He held a battered paperback open in one hand, the other splayed across the counter like it had grown there. He glanced up when I walked in, eyes pale and flat, gave me the smallest nod, and went back to his book. I walked the aisles, grabbed a root beer and a protein bar, but the whole time my ears stayed locked on that beeping. It never wavered, never missed a beat. At the register, I set down my stuff, and before I could stop myself, asked, "Hey, you hear that? The beeping back there?" For just a second, the man froze. His eyes didn't move, but his whole body seemed to pause like a film caught on a frame. Then he looked at me, slow and deliberate, and said, "It's the alarm battery. Does that sometimes." His voice carried no weight, no annoyance, no reassurance, no effort. Just flat, as if he'd rehearsed the line. I nodded like I believed him, though I didn't. He rang me up in silence. I slid a bill across the counter, took my change, mumbled a thanks, and stepped back into the night. The air outside was warm, heavy, and unmoving. I opened my car door, the root beer cold in my hand, and that's when I realized something. My badge, my work ID, was gone. I checked my pockets twice, patted down the seat beside me, even dug under the empty root beer bottle on the dash, but nothing. A sharp sigh escaped me. I must have left it on the counter when I pulled my wallet out. Annoyed at myself, I slid the key back into the ignition, killed the engine, and stepped out. The moment I pushed the door open again, I felt it. Something was off. The store wasn't the same as I'd left it. It was too still, too hollow. The humming of the cooler was gone, the faint buzz of the lights too. And the clerk, he was nowhere. The counter sat bare, not a paperback, not a coffee cup, not even a pen. It was as though no one had ever been there, except the beeping, louder now, rhythmic, steady, mechanical. It filled the silence in a way that set my teeth on edge. "Hello?" My voice cracked the stillness, sharper than I intended. Nothing. I stepped cautiously toward the register. The emptiness pressed in around me, and the absence of any sign of life made the air feel thick, almost wrong. The beep drew me farther, past racks of chips, candy, half-faded bottles of ibuprofen, until I found the source, or what I thought was the source. That's when I noticed it. A door. It hadn't been there before. I was sure of it. A narrow wooden door wedged between two dusty shelving units, cracked slightly open. No exit sign, no label, no knob I could see. Just there. Waiting. And the beeping, undeniably, came from behind it. Every instinct in me screamed to walk away, to leave, to get in my car, and never think about this place again. But instead, I put my hand on the edge of the door and pushed. The back room wasn't storage. It was something else. A hallway stretched out, long and dim, the linoleum curling up at the edges, exposed wires dangling like veins from the ceiling. The air smelled old, damp, stale, like an office gutted years ago and never reclaimed. My chest tightened. I stepped in anyway, and there it was, a single folding chair placed dead center in the hallway, like it had been waiting. On it, a tablet. The screen glowed, bright against the dark, and when I came close, words pulsed across it in bold white letters. Recording. Motion detected. My mouth went dry. I leaned over, forcing myself to look at the screen. The feed showed a grainy black and white image of the store's front aisle. Live. Watching me as I had walked in. Watching me now. Then I heard it. Behind me. A footstep. I turned, stomach lurching. The clerk stood in the doorway, silent, unmoving. His eyes caught mine, and he said in a voice low and steady, "You shouldn't be back here." I thought I left my badge," I stammered. My tongue felt heavy. "Didn't mean to. It's not here," he interrupted. Flat, certain, something twisted in my gut. "I didn't say I left it here," I murmured. He tilted his head, studying me with a faint smile that didn't belong on a human face. "Didn't you say you worked up the road?" Ice filled my veins. I hadn't told him that, not once. That half-smile deepened, barely there but enough to see. "We watch the ones who come in late," he said softly. "It's safer that way." I couldn't breathe. My heart thundered as I stumbled backward, words dying in my throat. Then I turned and ran. I bolted out of that store across the lot into my car. My hands shook so badly I fumbled the keys, but I got the engine started and peeled out, gravel spitting from the tires. I didn't look back until I was halfway up RG Town Loop. No headlights behind me, no shadows in the mirror. Nothing. When I finally returned to the office, the parking lot was dark, the building asleep. Except, my desk light was on. I never leave it on. Never. I walked inside slowly, every nerve raw. The air carried a faint smell I recognized instantly. Old floor cleaner, dust, the same sour tang from that Shell station. My throat closed as I reached my cubicle. And there it was. My badge, sitting neatly on my chair where I'd left it hours ago. I hadn't taken it to the gas station at all, but I had been certain, absolutely certain, I had. I stood staring at it for what felt like an hour, my pulse loud in my ears. I still don't know what I walked into that night. Maybe I never will. But I learned this much. Silence isn't always safe. Some of the quietest places hide the deepest unease. And sometimes curiosity doesn't just open doors. It walks you through ones that were never meant to be opened. I started taking long drives down the empty highways at night, treating it like a kind of therapy. It wasn't about reaching a place. It was about escaping one. Since Evan left, I'd been stuck in my childhood bedroom again, surrounded by stale air and wallpaper I'd hated since I was 15. Living with Dad wasn't a restart. It was a retreat. That claustrophobic weight was why I began slipping out after dark. No destination, no plan. Just drive until the gas tank dipped near half, then circle back home like nothing happened. That Sunday night in March was the same. I waited until Dad was asleep, then grabbed my coat around 8 and slid behind the wheel. The sky was sharp and cloudless, the air thick with damp earth. Nights like that remind you how small you are, like the world beyond the headlights is endless and forgiving. I pushed north on Route 92, rolling past shuttered farms and cabins with their windows black as stone. Pines pressed close on either side, their shadows cutting into the faded asphalt. My playlist shuffled through old folk songs I knew by heart, voices filling the silence so I didn't have to. By 9:30, the low fuel light blinked on. My chest tightened. I cursed myself for not filling up before leaving Dad's. Reluctantly, I turned off onto a smaller road and spotted the Greene County fuel stop. Its windows were dusty, the neon half dead, the whole place looking like time had given up on it. I pulled in. When I stepped out, the chill in the air carried that heavy stillness only midnight roads can hold. My phone read 9:38 p.m. Inside, everything felt slowed down, worn out. The weak jingle of the doorbell barely carried, and behind the counter stood a pale kid in a hoodie, one earbud dangling. The shelves sagged with dusty candy, limp sandwiches, gum packets no one had touched in weeks. I wandered toward the cooler, grabbed a soda I didn't want. It wasn't thirst, it was just an excuse not to go home yet. That's when I saw him. A man in his 40s maybe, tall but stiff, wrapped in a faded army jacket. His gait was uneven, a limp making him list slightly to one side. He didn't pick anything up, just drifted aisle to aisle, like he was searching for something he'd forgotten. When he stopped at the hot dog roller, he froze, eyes locked on the spinning meat as if he'd never seen food before. A tightness gathered in my throat, fear or instinct I couldn't tell. I forced myself to the counter, paid for the soda. The clerk glanced past me, then muttered, "Don't let that guy bother you," before I stepped back into the night. The lot was empty, only my car and the man's shape lingering by the payphone. I stood by my door, fumbling the keys with jittery hands. He didn't move, not even a twitch. Then I noticed the watch on his wrist, an old analog, glass cracked, the hands frozen. My eyes narrowed. 9:38, both hands locked. My stomach dropped. I checked my phone again. 9:38 p.m. Exact. My breath hitched, cold spreading through my chest. Gas cap still open, I scrambled into the driver's seat and locked the doors. He never turned, never even looked at me, but I could feel him all the same, heavy as a hand pressing into my gut. I shoved the nozzle into the tank, trying to steady my hands, forcing my breath slow. He's just another traveler, I told myself, just passing through. But the words felt thin, paper thin, against the pounding in my chest. But his presence carried weight, deliberate, heavy, almost predatory. I couldn't stop watching him. He never stepped closer, never spoke, but he stared, limp and rigid, eyes locked in that unblinking way that strips the air from your lungs. And that watch, always that broken watch. I finished pumping, shoved the nozzle back hard enough for it to clatter. That sound made him finally look at me. For the first time, his face turned. His eyes were hollow but sharp, like he knew something I didn't want to know. I didn't need to ask the time. I already knew what his mind was fixed on. I jumped into the car, doors locked before my hands even stopped shaking. The tires squealed as I floored it out of the lot, not waiting to see if the shadows of those cracked tiles shifted behind me. By the time the highway opened ahead, my pulse was still hammering. I kept replaying him in my head, the limp dragging step, the frozen watch face at 9:38, those eyes empty, yet unbearably aware. Why was he there? Who was he waiting for? My rearview mirror showed only darkness, no sedan behind me. But I felt him, as if his breath fogged the inside of my back window, as if he was sleepwalking along the shoulder just out of sight, mile after mile. That night I didn't sleep. Every time I shut my eyes, the limp came back. His shadow caught in each flicker of imagined streetlight, the broken clock face etched into the dark behind my eyelids. Around 2, I must have cried out because Dad tapped on my locked bathroom door. "You all right?" His voice was soft, cautious. "I'm fine, Dad," I whispered, though my throat was raw. He lingered, then shuffled away with the slow resignation of someone too old to argue with ghosts. I sat on the floor until my legs went numb. By dawn, sunlight felt almost indecent, too bright against what I'd carried back from that gas station. I dragged myself out, drank bitter coffee with Dad in silence, pretending the night had dissolved like a bad dream. By afternoon, I forced on clean clothes, walked to the coffee shop, hoping the brightness of day could unknot me. But the shadows stayed behind my eyes, long and intrusive, no matter how far the sun climbed. That night, Dad woke me again. His face was pale, his hands cautious as he held out my phone like it might burn him. "There's a voicemail," he said, voice lowered like we weren't alone. My stomach flipped. My hand shook as I snatched it from him. The timestamp glared. 9:38 p.m. My thumb hovered useless before I hit play. Static burst first, sharp and broken. Then came breathing, jagged, quick, too close to the microphone. And then a warped whisper stretched and wrong. "You shouldn't watch the time so closely. It's watching you back." My whole body locked. My skin went cold. I couldn't move. Dad sat with me, his face lined, eyes darting. "Is that from last night?" I finally choked out. He nodded once. "It's from 9:38. The tears broke before I could hold them. Everything came down at once. The limp, the eyes, the phone call, that watch refusing to move. This wasn't a prank. It wasn't coincidence. It was something watching me, synced with that warped hour. I haven't driven Route 92 at night since. But even without the road, he lingers. I still feel his eyes on the inside of my skull, especially when the clocks in the house tick too loud. The stove clock shines clean now. I wipe it daily, but I never look when it hovers near 9:38. I can't. Those minutes feel like open traps waiting to snap shut. I don't check voicemail anymore. I don't sit in the dark. Dad jokes that I upended my whole life over a broken watch, a man in a filthy jacket, and a voice on the phone. Maybe I did. Sometimes I wonder if I imagined it, if grief and fear just spun me out. But then I think of that message, the way my gut dropped, the way my body knew before my mind caught up. Time isn't just numbers ticking forward. Some hours are thresholds, doors that don't always stay closed. And some people are waiting there, waiting for someone to notice. I learned something sharp that night. Not every moment passes. Some moments wait. Some moments trap. And when the clock refuses to move, you should never assume you're the only one watching. They say you'll know when you've hit rock bottom. For some people, it's divorce papers. For others, it's shaking hands and cold sweats on a bathroom floor. For me, it wasn't any of that. Not the morning I found myself curled in the back seat of my Civic with 3 unpaid parking tickets stuffed in the glove box alongside an eviction notice. Not the days I woke up tasting metal and regret. My bottom came later, after I thought I was crawling my way out. I was 2 months sober when I took the graveyard shift at Mapler Cross Gas Deli, out on the ragged edge of Columbus. The place didn't look like much. It wasn't supposed to. You only noticed it if your tank was running on fumes and every other station was closed. 3 pumps, a blinking open sign that buzzed louder than it glowed, and a deli counter we mostly kept for show. The guy before me quit mid-shift after someone puked in the beer cooler and walked out without so much as an apology. I figured I could stomach worse. My car lived out back, tucked behind the dumpster where the cameras couldn't catch it. I told my manager I was crashing with a cousin in Groveport. He didn't push. I didn't volunteer. All he wanted was the coffee brewed, shelves stocked, and for me not to collapse before sunrise. Easy enough, or so I told myself. Then came pump 3, the first night I barely noticed. A white SUV rolled in around 2 a.m., early April, still cold enough for your breath to fog, warm enough for idiots to wander in barefoot. The SUV didn't fuel up, didn't idle long, just sat there, headlights burning, engine purring steady, like a dog waiting at a door. I gave it 10 minutes before turning away. Maybe GPS, maybe texting someone. In this job, you learn quick. People want gas, smokes, and silence. You don't ask questions you don't want answered. But the next night, the SUV came back. Same time, same pump, same nothing. By the 5th time, my stomach tightened the instant those headlights cut across the windows. And always, pump 3. Not 1, not 2, 3. Close enough to watch me, too far to speak. I told myself I was making stories out of shadows. My sponsor always said, "Stick to facts, April. Your brain likes drama better than truth." But one night, just past 2:10, I snapped. I pushed open the glass door and stepped into the cold. "Can I help you with something?" My voice sounded braver than I felt. Arms crossed, heart banging against my ribs like it wanted out. The window rolled halfway. He sat there, pale skin, short-cropped hair, early 40s maybe. No beard, no booze on his breath, no nervous tics, just blank, like someone had emptied him out. "You're not supposed to be here tonight," he said. Flat, calm. Then the window hummed back up. I don't scare easy anymore. Or I thought I didn't. That night I locked the doors, stared at the cameras, and didn't unclench until the sun scraped up over the trees. The next day I told my manager. Maybe he's waiting on someone. He shrugged. Maybe lost. Weirdos pass through here all the time. I called the non-emergency line anyway. A cruiser rolled by 2 hours later, too late. The SUV was gone. The officer leaned over the footage, but all we had was glare. Headlights bleeding across the asphalt. No plate, no decals, no reason. "He threaten you?" the cop asked, hand resting lazy on his belt. "He said I wasn't supposed to be here." The cop smirked. "Maybe you weren't." 3 days of silence followed. Just enough to make me feel foolish. Just enough for me to start breathing again. I scrubbed shelves, mopped sticky soda from tile, lingered in conversation with the nurses grabbing coffee before their night shifts. For a while, I forgot my car was my bed and my life was duct tape and AA slogans. I almost felt okay. Then, at 2:03 on the dot, he came back. I was at the register, counting crumpled singles, when the headlight swept over the windows. This time, the driver's door opened. I froze, watched him step out. One hand sunk into his jacket pocket, the other hanging loose. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at pump 3. He turned, slow, deliberate, toward the far corner of the lot. The air pump. He crouched down, unscrewed something, stayed there. No fidgeting, no glancing around, just still. I checked the clock. 17 minutes exactly. Then he stood, brushed off his knees, and climbed back into the SUV. Engine caught, headlights flared, and he was gone. I watched every second of the security feed that night, eyes glued to the monitor. The system glitched again, just one frame, between 2:18 and 2:19, a hiccup in the footage. But in that single frozen blur, his face didn't look right. Not in a horror movie way, not fangs or monster skin, just wrong. Like when a video buffer stutters and a smile stretches too wide, or eyes smear across the pixels until they don't belong to a person anymore. I whispered to myself, compression error. That's all. Cheap cameras, dust, lag. I made excuses, because the alternative left no footing. At 6:35 a.m., long after the SUV had gone, a kid pulled in. A Honda Civic, loud muffler rattling like it was about to fall off. Backward ball cap. He parked by the air pump, hopped out with this casual, tired energy only people in their 20s have. I was still half zoning out behind the counter when it happened. The bang came first, a gut punch boom that made the glass hum in its frame. I jerked upright, phone already in my hand. The kid screamed. By the time I ran out, his body was on the asphalt, writhing. His left hand was mangled, shredded down the palm like it had been fed through a grinder. Blood striped across the pavement in wet streaks, bright as chalk against blacktop. I dropped to my knees, voice cracking as I shouted into the phone. "We need an ambulance now. Mapler Cross gas, the air pump. He's bleeding bad." Later at the hospital, they said he'd lose 2 fingers. "Lucky," one nurse muttered. I didn't feel lucky. When I checked the air pump myself that afternoon, my chest hollowed. The valve had been cross-threaded, deliberately, carefully, so pressure built until it gave way. That wasn't bad luck. That wasn't wear and tear. Someone had done it on purpose. The cops came again, took their notes, asked the same dull questions. "See anyone tampering with equipment?" I showed them the footage, showed them the glitch, the one frame where the face bent wrong. They looked at each other, then back at me. "This looks altered," one said. They didn't mean the pump. They meant the video. "It's not tampered with," I snapped. "It's just bad frame rate. Look at the timestamps." They didn't care. One officer leaned his weight on his belt and smirked. "You work nights. Sleep deprivation does things. Tricks the mind." That was the end of their concern. The next night I found the sticky note, folded, placed just beneath the register monitor where my eyes couldn't miss it. "You didn't stop him. It's still yours to carry." I froze. The handwriting was mine. The looped A in carry, the hard cross on the T in stop. There was no denying it. My hand, my ink, my note. I don't remember writing it. My chest turned cold, like I'd slipped sideways out of my own body. I checked the cameras again, desperate for proof. That's when I saw it. The feed label wasn't Pump 3 anymore. It read, "April repeating." I hadn't changed it. No one else had access. Still, there it was. That was the crack. The moment I stopped trusting myself, I didn't drink, didn't touch pills. But something in me fractured, splintering quiet like a windshield hit by a stone. I stopped sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the hiss of escaping air, saw that distorted frame. I'd wake in the Civic, choking for breath, coat soaked in sweat, deli meat stench stuck in the fabric. I called my sponsor, left a voicemail. "I'm scared. I don't know what's real anymore." No answer. I tried to quit, but I couldn't afford it. The paycheck kept me tethered. Even the parking lot felt like an anchor, like if I left, I'd float off into nothing. 3 nights later, I sat behind the counter, staring at the door without blinking. At 2:03, nothing happened. No SUV, no headlights. But the feed flickered, the label shifted again. April, watching. I lasted 4 more days. Then I packed up, wrote my notice, drove. No map, no plan, just pavement pulling me away. 2 towns over, I parked behind another gas station. Picked up odd shifts at a 24-hour diner. Eventually scraped enough to rent a room with a lock that didn't stick. I changed my number, deleted my email, untied myself from the past one knot at a time. But sometimes, late at night, I still think about him. The man in the SUV. The way his voice was steady, not cruel, just certain. "You're not supposed to be here." Was it a warning, a curse, or just fact? What unsettles me most isn't the SUV or Pump 3 or the glitching camera. It's the weight I still feel in my chest, like I'm carrying something invisible but heavy. Every time I pass an air pump, I slow down. Every time I work a night shift, I check for notes. Every time I see my reflection, I look twice. The worst traumas are the quiet ones, the ones no one validates, the things that don't look like monsters but scrape reality just enough to make you doubt yourself. Pain, memory, responsibility. Some burdens aren't meant to be yours, but you'll carry them anyway until you finally decide to set them down. I used to love the quiet. The graveyard shift at Sunoco wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Just me. The hum of the fluorescents, an empty lot stretching out in front of the glass doors, and a beat-up radio tuned to those old detective dramas no one under 30 even knew existed. The voices crackled and hissed through static, and I'd listen while I stocked shelves, counted scratch-offs, and nursed gas station coffee that always tasted faintly of burnt toast. Bitter, a little stale, but familiar. I liked it that way. My name's Noah Darby. 26 now, though I spent the last year feeling frozen at 25. That's the age Nate, my twin, died. Car accident on the West Bypass, May 3rd last year. Rain slicked roads, hydroplaned into a tree. I was supposed to be with him. We'd made plans, but I picked up a shift instead. He always told me I worked too much, always teased me for it. Now I'd trade anything for one more argument about it. I rent a small room above the laundromat a couple doors down from the station. Not much. Single window, hot plate, a mattress so thin I can feel the springs through the sheet. But it's cheap, and it keeps me close to work. That was all I needed, at least until last month. It started subtle. April 30th, just past midnight. A customer walked in. Tall guy, busted denim jacket, 2 cans of Monster in his hand. He grinned and said, "Bet I'm your most exciting visitor tonight, huh?" Same rhythm, same pause, like he'd practiced the line in a mirror. Nothing unusual, except he came in again 30 minutes later. Same jacket, same drinks, same grin, same words. As if the moment was caught on a reel and someone hit repeat. I told myself I was tired. My sleep had been shot ever since Nate died. Some nights, I'd just sit on the floor of my room staring through the vent, watching the laundry spin below like it could hypnotize me into rest. I even started journaling after every shift, thinking maybe I'd just been misremembering things, that if I wrote it all down, I'd see a pattern. Maybe grief was just twisting reality the way everyone says it can. Then the cameras started doing it too. Between 12:10 and 1:10 every night, the security feeds would shutter, then roll backward for exactly 4 minutes and 14 seconds. Not scrambled, not glitching, just clean reverse, like someone pressed rewind on time itself. When I checked the recordings later, that slice of time was gone. Jump cut, neat and precise, like it had never been there. And then came the van. A white delivery truck, no logos, nothing but duct tape across the back door spelling out one word I couldn't quite read before it pulled in. Always at 12:42. Idled for 6 minutes, left. No driver, no delivery, just the low grumble of its engine fading into silence. The next morning, I called the supplier, still hoping it was a scheduling mix-up. "We don't run overnight routes anymore, not out there," the rep told me. Their voice was firm, final. I didn't argue, just hung up. Later, when I checked the feed, I watched myself step outside like I was about to confront it. But in the next blink, I was back behind the counter, staring at the monitor as the van rolled off. No memory of walking back inside. That was the night I stopped lying to myself. I wasn't fine. After that, I forced normal. Stocked the fridge, wiped down counters, smiled at regulars like nothing was wrong. But the loops kept happening. People, conversations, whole scenes replaying with eerie precision. Janine, she's been coming in since January, walked up to the counter for her usual pack of menthols and a cherry soda. She set them down gently, almost like she was afraid they'd shatter me instead of the glass. Her eyes lingered on mine, searching. "I've already asked you this," she murmured, glancing past me toward the gum rack. Same spot, same words. I gave a small laugh, forcing lightness into my voice. Maybe we're just creatures of habit, right? Her face didn't change. Her voice flattened. "No. You said that last time too." I froze. The register hummed between us, the only sound. I had no idea what to say. Janine scooped her change into her palm, but her eyes stayed locked on me like she was afraid I might shatter in front of her. She leaned in just slightly, voice dropping to a whisper. "Noah, whatever happened last year, it doesn't think you should have survived. You're stuck." And then she walked out. No goodbye, no glance back. Just gone. After that, things got worse. The gas pump alarm started chirping in the middle of the night. Not the long screech it gave when someone drove off, just a single sharp beep, like a nozzle had been lifted. Every time I checked, the lot was empty. Still, the beeping kept coming. Then one night, all the pumps shut off at once. 12:13 a.m. Dead silence. I stepped outside and the air felt heavy, pressing against me like a wet blanket. No wind, no traffic on the highway, not even the buzz of insects. Just stillness. Then pump 2 lit up. Beep, pump 4, beep, pump 7, beep, pump 3, beep. The order hit me like ice water down my spine. 2473. Nate's birthday. I don't know how long I stood there staring at those glowing numbers before my body finally obeyed me and moved. I went back inside, locked the doors, hands shaking so badly, I knocked over the candy display. The next morning, I pulled the transaction logs. That hour didn't exist. No entries, no card swipes, no cash drawer openings. Like the store had been erased. From then on, the loops tightened. Timestamps on receipts started coming out wrong. May 2022, exactly 1 year behind. My journal confirmed it. The same customers in the same order, the same weather outside, the same everything. Like the night was a taped-over rerun. One shift, the radio drifted mid-show into an ad for a pizza place that had shut down 8 months earlier. The register flickered and rebooted into the old interface we'd replaced last July. The freezer roared louder than usual, and that's when I saw him. Through the glass door of the freezer aisle, behind neat rows of TV dinners and cartons of ice cream, Nate was there. Not his body, not a vision either, his reflection. He lifted his hand and waved. His face was pale, covered in a frost glaze, like he'd been standing inside the glass all this time, watching me. Smiling. Not scared, just present. I stumbled back so hard I smacked the back of my head on the cooler rack. When I blinked again, the glass had fogged over. His reflection was gone. I turned slowly, heart rattling in my chest, and saw the calendar tacked above the cigarettes. May 3rd, 2022. The day he died. That night cracked something in me. I didn't bother with the lights anymore. I sat behind the counter in the dark, eyes glued to the monitor, waiting, praying that if I just kept watching, I could catch it, stop it, change it. 12:42 a.m., the van came back. Only this time, no idling, no alarms. It just parked. The headlights cut off. I walked outside, slow, letting each breath cloud in the cold. The back doors were already open. Inside was no cargo, no shelves, just a single full-length mirror bolted upright against the frame. I leaned in, bracing for my own reflection. But it wasn't me. It was Nate. His face was pale, drawn, eyes heavy with exhaustion. This time, he wasn't smiling. He looked straight at me and mouthed the words, "You weren't supposed to take my place." And then, nothing. I blinked, and I was back inside, behind the counter, the register screen glowing. Timestamp, 12:03 a.m. Like the night had reset. I don't work there anymore. 2 weeks ago, my manager found me curled up on the floor of the walk-in cooler, clutching a sticky note I didn't remember writing. 4 words in jagged ink. Stay out of the loop. He said I was burnt out, suggested a vacation. I laughed, actually laughed in his face, and walked out for good. The next day, I found something in my coat pocket. Nate's hospital wristband, still creased, still faintly stained, still warm. I don't know what's real anymore. I know I lived, and he didn't. And I've been moving through this life like a stand-in, like someone else's survivor. Sometimes I think the loops still play without me. Maybe someone else is caught now, Maybe they'll figure it out. Some grief doesn't fade. It replays, loops. We carry our guilt like echoes, running the same scenes over and over in our heads, begging them to change. But reliving the past doesn't fix it. It only locks us there. The only way forward is through, not around it, not behind it. Through the pain, through the guilt, through the fact that we survived, even when we wish we hadn't. It's the only way to start living again. You don't really understand what silence feels like until you're stuck alone at 2:37 in the morning, with nothing but a dryer full of jeans tumbling in a metal drum. That was Cedar Spin wrote for me. Noise without voices, light without warmth, repetition without comfort. After the breakup, I came back to my hometown. Not because I wanted to, but because I had nowhere else left to crawl to. Rent in St. Louis was a joke, and freelance graphic design doesn't exactly scream stability when your life detonates all at once. So I ended up in the spare room of my dad's old house. He's been gone 4 years now, but the place still holds the smell of his burnt coffee and dust in the air vents, like the house hasn't noticed he's not there anymore. The laundromat became my refuge, not because I gave a damn about laundry, nobody really likes it, but because I couldn't sleep. I tried everything. Prescription pills that left my tongue dry, cutting out caffeine, even leaving my phone in another room like every blog insists. None of it worked. Cedar Spin wrote had its rhythm, the steady hum of machines, the clink of doors closing, the relentless buzz of fluorescent lights that never tired no matter how I did. It wasn't peace exactly, but it was something to anchor to. Then, in early October, something shifted. That night I showed up a little later than usual, 2:35 maybe, empty as always. I hauled my basket in, picked my usual machine, the 6th in the front row, and started sorting whites. That's when I saw him. A man, standing just outside the glass door, staring in. At first I thought he might be drunk, maybe waiting for a ride. But he didn't move. Didn't shift from one leg to the other. Didn't blink. Just stood there. 5 minutes at least. My skin prickled. I looked away for a second, literally a second, and when I looked back, he was gone. I never heard the door open, never heard it shut. I forced myself to focus. Maybe he left. Maybe I missed it. But when I turned to the detergent machine, my eyes flicked up to the corner monitor. That's when my stomach hollowed. On the screen, I was already inside. Same red hoodie, same black leggings, same green phone case balanced on the table beside me. But I wasn't just there. I was sitting in folding chair number 3. I watched myself look up, and then, God, on screen, my eyes locked right onto mine. I spun around. The chair was empty. The monitor still showed me sitting there. I left my basket where it was and bolted out into the October air, breath clouding, heart sprinting. I told myself I was overtired. Maybe it was an old recording. Maybe the system glitched. But I didn't really believe that. Not after the way she, the me, looked straight back at me. I didn't return for a few days. I washed what I could in the old sink at home and tried to bury the memory under denial. I've gotten good at that. Convincing myself something didn't happen is practically survival at this point. But insomnia doesn't care how badly you want to pretend. After 3 nights pacing the living room at 4 a.m., I caved. Back to Cedar Spin wrote. Same hum, same sterile light, same half-comfort. And again, the glitch. I walked in just after 2:30, this time heading down the far aisle to switch things up, maybe trick my brain. But I made the mistake of glancing up at the monitor. There I was. Same corner camera, mounted high. But I wasn't just walking in like I thought. I was already loading machine number 9. I froze, staring. On screen, my double reached into the basket and pulled out a pair of jeans. I looked down. That exact pair was still clutched in my hands. I hadn't moved yet. Then, too soon, the screen version of me looked up just a fraction early, and our eyes locked. The jeans slipped from my hands. I turned and walked straight out without shutting the machine lid. My body was trembling when I climbed into the car. My first thought was Cody, my best friend since 7th grade. He picked up after a few rings, groggy, annoyed. "Dude, seriously, it's 3 in the morning. "Cody," I said, breathless. "Listen, something happened. At the laundromat. The cameras." He cut me off with a half yawn. "You already told me this." "What?" "This. The laundromat. The double. The weird footage. You called me about it last week." My stomach dropped. "No, Cody, I didn't." "Yeah, you did." His voice was sharp now, tired and final. "Go to bed." Then he hung up. I set my phone down, hands shaking so bad I almost dropped it. My pulse thudded in my ears. And when I glanced up into the rear view to back out, that's when I saw it. A sticky note, pressed dead center against the mirror. "Stop using my machines." That was what the sticky note said. The words should have been ridiculous, just a joke, maybe a crank message. But the worst part wasn't that it was happening. The worst part was the sudden, sick realization that it wasn't new. This wasn't the first time. I tore through my phone, scrolling through texts, emails, even voicemails. Nothing obvious. Nothing saying, "Hey, by the way, you've got a double hanging around the laundromat." But then I found it. A blurry photo I'd sent Cody a few nights earlier. It was of the laundromat monitor. No caption, no explanation. Timestamp, 2:44 a.m. The image was shaky, but it was clear enough. My stomach tightened. I didn't remember taking it. After that, sleep became impossible. Not that I'd been getting much before, but now the idea of closing my eyes felt dangerous, terrifying. What if I drifted off and woke up to find I wasn't me anymore? What if I wasn't even the real one to begin with? The next morning, I forced myself back to Cedar Spin Road in daylight. I told myself it would look harmless in the sun. Mrs. Clean was there, perched behind the counter with her crossword book. Gray hair knotted up, a tinny oldies station humming in the background. She'd been working there since I was a kid. "Hey, Mrs. Clean," I said, trying to sound casual. Is there something wrong with the cameras? They've been glitching?" She didn't look up, just flipped her pencil, circled a word, and said flatly, "You know that's not you, right?" I froze. "What?" The woman on the monitor. Her voice was matter-of-fact, like she was telling me the weather. "That's not you. She's been here every night this week." I laughed nervously, waiting for her to smile to let me off the hook. She didn't. "I'm the only one here at night," I said. My voice cracked a little. "No." She finally glanced up, eyes sharp and certain. "You're not. I check the tapes every morning. That girl gets here before you." I left without saying another word. My throat was dry the whole walk back to the car. The next night I didn't bring laundry. I brought a camera, set it on the folding table, number 2, where I had the clearest angle of the corner monitor. I pressed record, sat myself down in chair number 3, and waited. At exactly 2:37 a.m., she appeared on screen, the other me. Already seated in the chair I was sitting in, perfectly still, she raised her hand and held up 3 fingers. I blinked, and then, without thinking, 1 minute later, I raised my own hand. 3 fingers, like I was following a script someone else had written for me, one I hadn't read. I spiraled after that. I stopped leaving the house after dark, stopped talking much even to Cody. I avoided mirrors. I started recording little voice memos dated and time-stamped. "This is real. You are here. Today is October 10th. This is your voice." Every morning I'd play them back, needing to hear myself to know I hadn't split. But I couldn't stay away forever. One night I drove to Cedar Spin Road. I didn't go inside. I just parked and stared through the glass. Waited. At 2:34 a.m., the automatic doors slid open on their own. No one came through. But inside, machine number 6 started running. a load of laundry spinning on its own. It wasn't me. I finally worked up the nerve to go in. The air smelled of detergent and faint mildew. No baskets, no shoes on the floor. Just that one machine running a cycle halfway through, the door warm when I touched it. I bent closer, peering into the glass. My reflection stared back at me, but wrong. It didn't move with me. My head tilted left. Hers lagged a half-second behind. My hand reached forward. Hers stayed still. That's when I realized I wasn't the one being copied. I was the copy. I don't go back to Cedar Spin Road anymore. I packed my laptop, shut down my freelance contracts, turned off my phone. 3 days later, I left town. Rented a cabin outside Hannibal. No mirrors, no cameras. I tell myself I'm safe. But still, I keep a towel draped over the bathroom mirror, just in case. And the dreams started, always the same. The other me, the one who never left, folding clothes that don't belong to me. Looking up, just waiting for me to notice. Sometimes I think about that sticky note. Stop using my machines. But here's the thought I can't shake. What if I wasn't the victim? What if I was the one who stole her place? What if she was here first, and I was the mistake? What if I'm already inside? When the mind gets stretched too thin, reality ripples. And in those cracks, the things we bury claw their way out. Not every double wants to haunt you. Sometimes they're just waiting to take back what you borrowed without asking. Know yourself. Anchor yourself. Because if you don't, something else will.